If baseball were different, how different would it be? And if this thought haunts your dreams, well, stick around and see what Ben and Meg have to say philosophically and pedantically. It's effectively wild. Effectively wild!
Hello and welcome to episode 2452 of Effectively Wild, a FanGraphs baseball podcast brought to you by our Patreon supporters. I'm Meg Rowley of FanGraphs, and I'm joined by Ben Lindbergh of The Ringer. Ben, how are you?
Doing great. We are almost at the end of this odyssey. It's our second to last preview pod.
Yeah.
We'll be talking about the Atlanta Braves with Grant McAuley, and then we'll be talking about the White Sox with James Fegan of FanGraphs and also Sox Machine. So that'll be fun. But just a bit of banter before we get there. I'm quite enjoying this Braiden Ward spring training story, this stolen base thief. Have you seen that Braiden Ward has set a record with an asterisk, with a caveat, which is that spring training records go back 20 years, basically. Before that, no one knows what anyone accomplished in spring training. I guess the records haven't really been digitized reliably. So now it's just kind of, MLB has spring training stats back to 2006 and minor league stats to around the same time. And that's very accessible. And so that just kind of gets treated as, well, that's the limits of our knowledge. Beyond that, there be dragons. But he has the most stolen bases in a single spring training on record. I suppose we can say he has set the record for spring training stolen bases. And he celebrated in style because he was encouraged by his teammates, if he did this, to pull a Rickey Henderson and grab the bag, rip the bag out of the earth, and brandish it, just like Rickey did when he stole his 939th base and claimed the bag as his own. Braiden Ward of the Red Sox, at least for the moment, he did the same when he set this spring training stolen base record. So this is just a fun little story because often when we talk about sort of fluky spring training performances or remember when that guy did that and then this actual season started and he didn't do anything else, usually it's about power. It's someone just goes off and hits a bunch of tanks in spring training. But I don't really remember the equivalent of that for stolen bases. So he has done it. He stole his 17th base.
Wow.
On Thursday, and that set that record. And that's kind of fun. I like it.
Yeah. It's fun. It's also, I understand there are probably still spring training-y aspects of this. It's not like it's nothing, but when you can steal a base, you can steal a base, right? It's like hitting the ball hard. Like you've demonstrated a capacity for an important skill, whether you're able to keep doing it, whether you get on base enough for it to matter. There are all kinds of things. It's not enough. We know it's not enough to just be able to do that, but also something to be able to do that. It's something pretty cool and potentially important, profile defining for some.
And he has demonstrated that skill in the minors and at AAA. And he has, over the past 5 seasons, his 5 minor league seasons, he has swiped 211 bags and been caught only 30 times. And last year, with the Rockies, he stole 57 bags in AAA and AA and was caught only 7 times. So he's a speedster and he's got good efficiency, good success rate. And he's putting himself on the radar. It's not entirely clear that he will even make the opening day roster, despite all these heroics, which is why, hey, celebrate while you can. Have your Rickey in spring training moment. That's great because this could possibly be the peak for you. He's 27, like he still has some time, but when your game is so speed based, you want to make it sooner rather than later. So, but he has maybe put himself on the radar to be, I don't know if he could be kind of like a late season call up. Maybe you need just a designated runner type. You need a pinch runner for the playoffs or something. Maybe he has made himself a candidate for that potentially. And regardless, he has starred in spring training because he had an opportunity knocked because the whole Red Sox outfield was in the WBC basically this spring. And so he got to get some playing time and he has made the most of it. And he has, he's kind of been tearing it up, not just on the bases, but like at the plate too. Obviously, to steal that many bases, as you noted, you have to actually get on base a bunch. And he has almost a 500 OBP.
Yeah.
And it's 34 at bats. He's also walked 4 times. He has a weird line. It's 382, 488, 412. So the 488 on base and the 412 slug. So he has 13 hits and all but one of them singles. He has 1 double. That's the lone extra base hit. So that's what you're getting with Braiden Ward. But, he's given himself some folk hero potential here, even if he goes down to Worcester or something. Maybe people enjoy him there. It's always nice to have a speed demon around.
Yeah.
And everyone encouraged him. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a crowded situation in Boston, as you noted.
Yes.
Like not exactly an easy outfield to break into.
No.
Some talented big leaguers might get dealt out of that group at some point this year just because they don't have a way to get everybody in the lineup. But, it could be worse.
Yeah, and everyone put him up to this Ricky thing because I can imagine someone being like, "Wow, who does this kid think he is?"
Right.
Like, but no, they wanted him to do it,
Yeah.
and he said I wasn't going to do that in general, but they were all egging me on, not in a Ryan Lambert way. How often do you get to do something like that? How many episodes can I mention Ryan Lambert?
I don't know,
We'll
but I
find
don't
out.
like it. Every single time you do it, it makes me so mad. No.
How often do you get to do something like that? It's for the boys. You know what I mean? It was something for us and for us to celebrate a little bit during spring training. Spring training's supposed to be fun and laid back. That's nice. Yeah.
That is nice.
And Alex Cora said it was okay. I guess they cleared it with him and then cleared it with like the veterans. Like Trevor Story was like, sure, go for it. And then everyone said, do it. And then Cora sounds somewhat impressed. He said, he's a good base runner. It's not like he's out there just running for the hell of it. He gets good jumps, but he's very picky when to go. And amusingly, he didn't know that this was something to aim for. He didn't know what the spring training record is, like the modern, post-tracking spring training stats record. But someone pointed it out on Twitter, I guess, when he had 12. And then he was like, hey, I can do it, So he's trying to get to 20 or 25. He wants to keep pushing. But yeah, this is fun. I don't know that Braiden Ward even came up on our Red Sox preview segment because he wasn't really expected to play a big part on the roster this year. Yeah, and Cora, like his eyes have been opened a little. He said, I knew he was fast, but I didn't know the rest of the player, to be honest with you. The bunting thing is real. He's getting better in the outfield. The at-bats are getting better too. He's gaining a lot of confidence. So good for him. And maybe this leads to some sort of opportunity down the line. And he said, when I run, I want to be safe. Yeah, that's a good philosophy, I think.
Yeah.
He said, I remember back in college, they used to tell us, if you're going to run, it's better to be picked off than it is to be thrown out. Interesting. If I get to second, I want to be safe because we have good hitters behind us that can put the ball in the gap. Yes, that all checks out. You do indeed want to be safe, not out. That is the goal when you are the base runner. But good for him. So I hope he keeps running up the score even more. And speaking of running up the score, so I wanted to ask you about this. Have you been following the Bam Adebayo story at all? It's been everywhere, but I know you've been head down prospect lists, positional power rankings coming up, bold preseason predictions pod next week.
Right.
So a lot cooking.
I've definitely thought a lot about that already and have them locked in already. So here's the thing. You're right to say this is bedtime for Meg. Your girl is struggling. She's very stressed, feeling it in my body already. And the positional power rankings haven't even begun to roll out. Although everyone hitting their deadlines, Ben, just like I work with such good, thoughtful people. They're doing their stuff. But even in my gremlin state, in the deep hole I am in, this has permeated. And I have thought to myself, well, this is pretty dumb though, right? Like as discourse is the expectation. I'm sorry. I understand well, you're the general sports knower.
course,
So
yes.
let me, for the benefit of our listenership, make sure that my understanding is correct, and then we can use that as an opportunity to lay out the controversy here. So Bam was playing. He plays for the Miami Heat. Yes,
Correct. Mm-hmm.
He plays for the Miami Heat, who are playing the Washington Wizards.
Mm-hmm.
The Washington Wizards are a very bad basketball team.
Quite bad. Yes. Terrible, tanking, etc. Yeah.
And have been for quite a while now. Has been just a really long stretch of mediocrity. Bam, perhaps taking advantage of how bad they are. Though my understanding is he also shot like a bonkers number of free throws in this game, right?
Yes.
He surpassed Kobe.
He did. He had the temerity.
For the single game scoring record. So now he is in second place.
Right. Behind Wilt's 100.
Right.
Yep.
Behind Wilt, who maybe had another record.
Yes.
Knocked down this week. Was that another
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? Yes. Yeah. It's been a tough time for Wilt. I mean, I guess Bam just reaffirmed how impressive Wilt's 100 was.
Right.
But yes, there was an SGA breaking another Wilt record, a scoring streak.
Okay, scoring streak.
Yeah,
wow,
20-point streak. Yeah.
When you go to Bam Adebayo's Google page, there's like confetti. The Google does a little animation there. Mm-hmm. Okay, that seems unnecessary, but sure. So this happened, and people got some people got very upset. Here's the thing that I always struggle with when it comes to internet controversy, and it's worth asking yourself this question as an observer of discourse, just to dial in how worked up you need to get. I couldn't tell if a lot of people were upset or if a couple of very loud people were upset about this. It struck me as pretty silly. Like, is the expectation that we just, I understand that Kobe is dead, but that we just have a reverence for that not record?
Yes.
In perpetuity? Because this is am I being a little unfair? I don't think I am. Also, could be a shooter still. Like, that's surprising to me.
Yeah. Many, maybe more over time. But
just
the legend being
the
burnished.
Indiscretions have faded into the rear view for some.
And that. Yeah.
There are a couple of things about this that strike me as very silly. The first being, it's not a record that he broke. He didn't break the record. He surpassed the previous second place record holder. Yes. How do we say that? He surpassed the guy, but he didn't break the record himself. So Isn't this much ado about nothing? Second of all, I have seen much of the consternation be about the Kobe of it all. And then there's also been some consternation that it's like unseemly because the Wizards are bad, but it's like Bam doesn't get to decide who he plays. Like, Bam.
Yeah, there have already been so many cycles of discourse about this.
Okay.
And I bring it up to invoke the idea of what would a baseball comp to this be, because this is, after all, baseball podcast. We will be discussing this on Hang Up and Listen on Monday, and I'm looking forward to it because I'm kind of delighted by the story. But that's the question. Can there even be a baseball equivalent? But yes, there have been all sorts of, there's hand-wringing that's happening here. There are people suggesting he should have taken himself out of the game. There's all sorts of unwritten rule stuff going on here, because whenever there's a record set in almost any sport in any way, there's always some sort of extenuating circumstance, or there's always some condition that contributed to that. And in order to do this in basketball, to score this many points, you have to have things work out in your favor, yes, but you also have to push it, right? And the Heat were, there was all sorts of fouling happening here to keep sending him back to the line. And at a certain point, when they realized that this was sort of within reach, or it was really a thing, they were trying to stretch it, right, and run the score up as high as they possibly could. And so is that unbecoming? And yes, the opponent quality, and was this unseemly for him to do this, for the team to do this? is this some poor reflection on the sport? I just thought it was silly and absurd and fun because it was so improbable and such an outlier. And it gave us so many chances to say Bam Adebayo, which is wonderful because we want to say Bam Adebayo. And he's like the perfect person to do this, to just break everyone's brain, I think, because he is a good player. He's a very good player, but he's not at all the type of player one would expect to have done this. His previous career high was 41 points in a game. So he more than doubled that, and that was 5 years ago or something. Like, he's a good all-around player, two-way player, good defensive player. He's not an elite scorer. And so it was just so weird. He would not have been anywhere near the top of the list of candidates to surpass Kobe's 81 with 83. And so it's just the outlier of all outliers. And so I just say appreciate it for the absurd spectacle it is.
I guess the other part of this that I find so perplexing is that, like, you could say a lot of things about Kobe. You could describe him a lot of different ways and be accurate. But, like, one of the things that guy is famous for was being, like, very hyper competitive, no?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So,
and in his games, I mean, of course, the famous, infamous last game of his career where he was just taking every shot and it was just preposterous, really. But even in the one where he had 81, that wasn't quite as lopsided like that. But a lot has to happen, and you do have to stretch things to,
I would imagine that, like, if, and again, I didn't know the man, but if Kobe were alive today, I have to imagine that he would be like, I don't know, shoot or shoot. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it just seems, the part of it that maybe is the most bizarre to me is that the people who seem the most worked up about it are Kobe fans who seem to, like, fundamentally maybe misunderstand their dude. So I don't get that part. I know that this isn't really why you brought this up, but I have been turning it over in my head because it's such a strange fascination and fixation. And I don't know, like, anytime a team is so bad that they get absolutely owned by an opponent, sure, maybe you say at a certain point, like, that's too much, but it almost always just reinforces the notion that, like, hey, you're a bad franchise. Get it together, man. Like, tighten up. Like, isn't that, you know what I mean? Like, if anyone should be embarrassed in this situation, it doesn't seem like it should be Bam Adebayo. Oh, yeah, it's a great name, man.
It is. But yeah, there's obviously extreme stat padding happening here, but there pretty much always is with anything in this kind of range. Right. So I'm not getting too bent out of shape about it. So, and like when Wilt did it, the whole game broke down and there were defenders who weren't playing. And then, they were just kind of like everyone was on him and it just became fouling back and forth. And it's nonsense, obviously. Like it's not great basketball, but just appreciate the silliness of it and just the fever dream of what, who, how?
Yeah.
And just like the inefficiency of it and the number of free throws that were required. Anyway,
so many free throws. And they kept fouling him,
Yeah,
like some of this is, hey, what do you could you keep fouling him.
It's very strange. So could there be a baseball equivalent to this? I was mulling this over, and then I saw that Jonathan in our Facebook group had also posed this question. Has there been any baseball equivalent to this, or what would the baseball equivalent to this be? Because your initial inclination is just to think of someone who had some improbable outlier game. Yeah. And there were people who suggested, oh, well, it's Don Larson throwing a perfect game, or it's Scooter Gennett hitting 4 homers in a game or something. But first of all, I think that's selling Bam short because he's actually a better player than those guys were. So it's not quite equivalent in that respect. But then also, I don't think it captures the magnitude of what he did. And I don't know that there is a perfect baseball equivalent because baseball cannot deform in this way.
Yeah.
In quite the way that basketball can, where just the normal rules can break down and you can just decide, I'm going for it and everyone's in on this and we're just going to run up the score as high as possible. for one thing, in baseball, there's just so many guardrails with unwritten rules and everything. But I mean it more in terms of there are guardrails because it's not quite as malleable a sport because you can't just put the ball or the bat in anyone's hands at any time, which you can kind of do much more easily in basketball. So in baseball, you've got a batting order and, you have pitchers who are taken out. They can't keep pitching and they can't pitch forever and you can't put them back in. And so you can't just kind of draw up the plays to just have someone keep swinging or keep throwing indefinitely. So it's just structurally, I don't think it works quite as well. I think maybe some sort of analog would be, so there are, I guess, a lot of examples across sports of just trying to, kind of give someone a record at a certain point or take it easy. It's like, I guess the equivalent for this, sometimes this happens with like sacks in football. Someone's setting a sack record and then, did they just give it to him? In baseball, I think that would be kind of just like the Strahan breaking the single season sack records before Myles Garrett had it. And then there was like, did Brett Favre just kind of give him a sack?
Right.
And then did Joe Burrow just give Myles Garrett a sack? And then there's been other stuff like this in basketball too. But in baseball, I guess this would be just kind of giving someone a cookie, just like,
Right.
And every now and then you hear that, like someone's setting a home run record or whatever, or it's an all-star game or something. Just put one over the middle, tell them what's coming and give them a good hack at it. But that doesn't happen enough times, really. And maybe the equivalent would be position player pitchers. Like, I guess, if you had someone who was a good player, but not a huge power source, and somehow he had a 4-homer game and then he came up again and a position player pitcher were in, which as we've talked about, it seems like maybe it's getting likelier that we will get a 5-homer game because we're always in that situation now. If there is a blowout, typically there is going to be a position player pitcher in,
right?
Which would stain the accomplishment. I hope that if it happens, it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
But it's almost like if it's going to happen, it probably will happen that way, unless someone respects the sanctity of going for 5 and actually like leaves a real pitcher in there to make it more real. But we have seen situations where this could have happened, and I was glad it didn't because it just would have tarnished it. So maybe that, or if then it goes to extras or something, and I don't know, you get 6 or who knows, but like. There's only, even like the Sean Green game is not a bad comp, I guess, because Sean Green is kind of a Bam Adebayo type player. Like he was very good, but not the greatest or anything, or not someone you would think would have that incredible game that Sean Green had. So like maybe that, but it doesn't feel like that stretched the bounds of what normally would happen the way that Bam's game did.
Yeah, it's hard when your sport already has a blowout off ramp, like the position player pitching rule, right? Like we've already established circumstances under which we don't take any of it quite as seriously because the margin is so huge. I also think that we don't remember these things, right? There are plenty of home runs hit against like big league relievers, and like maybe that guy's bad and he gets the option and never comes up again, right? Or doesn't play a meaningful role for his team. And we don't remember that. You couldn't tell me everyone who threw a home run to Aaron Judge in the year he surpassed Maris, right? Like you couldn't tell me every guy. And I bet some of those guys, they might have been scripts, they might have been scripts. And we forget. Our memories let us forget these things so that we can enjoy the accomplishment more generally. But I think it's hard to replicate it when you have already said, we need a means by which to acknowledge the silliness of the moment. And by that, we mean put a position player in. Yeah.
Remember when this was 2019? Remember Mike Minor was going for 200 strikeouts, right? And then there was Chris Owings, the Red Sox shortstop. He let a catchable foul pop-up drop, or was it Chris Owings was hitting? Yeah, and then Ronald Guzman was playing first for the Rangers and let the ball drop to give Minor another chance at getting his 200th strikeout. And, who really cares about Mike Minor's 200th strikeout in the 2019 season, right? It's not quite as historic. Yeah, maybe he did. But if something like that happened in a higher stakes situation, say someone was going for 20 strikeouts in a game, that's a historic thing. Like that would be a big deal, or going for 21 or something, trying to go to unprecedented heights of strikeout getting. And maybe it was a good pitcher, but not an elite strikeout pitcher, not the guy you would expect to do that. And then let's say maybe, I guess either it was, a really weak lineup, or they put in some scrub, or like they had a pitcher bat or something so he could get it. I mean, that wouldn't happen probably, but or maybe more realistically, he's got 20 strikeouts and there are 2 outs in the 9th or something. And then there's a ground ball, let's say, and a defender flubs it to give him another chance at getting the 21st or something. What with pitch count limits these days, who knows how realistic that even is. But something like that, just kind of not taking the out to give him another chance at making history, and it being kind of an improbable pitcher to do that. I think maybe that would be sort of, kind of that same shameless, let's just get this accomplishment for him, even if it means that we kind of have to turn this into a travesty or something. So yeah, that might work, I guess. But even that, it's not, I don't know. It's not quite as far out of the realm of just 83. Bam Adebayo? What?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if it were a guy who just had never gotten more than 10 strikeouts or something in a single game, and suddenly he more than doubled it as Adebayo did in this game, that might be a decent equivalent.
Yeah. Again, it's not that it couldn't happen. It would just be rare. But then again, this was rare, right?
Yeah.
So there's that, I suppose. But yeah, people were very worked up,
Yes. Yep. But we're pretty upset about this. And I think plenty of people also just appreciated it in the spirit of, well, that was weird. That happened.
Yeah.
Sports.
It's what do you really need to defend the honor of the Washington Wizards? They're not interested in defending their own honor. Why are you acting as a soldier in their war? They're not doing that. They're wizards.
It's like we talked about Goodhart's Law not long ago. It's just the idea that once something becomes a target, it's no longer a good measure because people will just do things differently in order to just juice their stats in that one measure. So that's kind of the point here. Once you get up to 70 something points or whatever, it's it almost ceases to be an athletic accomplishment, and it just becomes kind of how much can we just sort of deform the regular rules in order to bring this about. But I don't mind. I think it's fun. So if you want to hear me talk more about Bam Adebayo, tune in to Hang Up and Listen on Monday.
Yeah.
But if you have suggestions for other baseball equivalents that either have happened or could happen, then do let us know. I don't think there's a perfect equivalent just because of the structural differences.
He didn't actually break the record, That's the thing about it. It's he moved into second place. Everyone stand down.
Yeah. I mean, it's the modern record, I guess. Perhaps depending on, post-merger or whatever. Yes, it's no one expected this to be a story this week.
I don't want to be Kobe had a family. I don't mean to be insensitive, but I also suspect, and I say this with all the respect I can, that if Kobe were still alive, this wouldn't be a big story.
Yeah, you'd like to think that he would just kind of tip his cap. I mean, basketball players don't wear caps when they're playing, but
they don't wear caps,
figuratively speaking. Mm-hmm.
But he was, he wasn't playing anymore, so maybe, I don't know if he was a cap guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he broke LeBron's single game Heat record, and LeBron thought that was cool. So okay. And I just want to recommend to you a sci-fi show, which
to me,
yes, or everyone who's listening,
but specifically to me,
it's not an Apple TV show for once, though there's no shortage of those. And For All Mankind.
Including Monarch Legacy of Monsters.
Yes, which is back, and For All Mankind coming back in a couple weeks. But
it's a load-bearing part of my psyche right now, I got to tell you. It's like really important to me, that and the looming theoretical Criterion sale. Really holding up a lot.
Paradise season 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a baseball show. That's why I bring it up.
So, okay. I started Paradise. I didn't get very far. I got to the point where the psychiatrist lady and Sterling K. Brown get in the shower. And I was like, Sterling, you're not skipping leg day, my guy. Look at that.
Yeah, he's not skipping any day. Yeah.
No, looking great, buddy. Mm-hmm. But it was to reveal a secret because they're being observed. But my sense was, and you don't have to tell me if I'm right, but my sense was that whatever happened to precipitate their move into this community, which I will not say more about for people who might want to watch and haven't seen any of it, involved like profound ecological disaster. And I was not into that vibe at the time because I think I started it in the midst of the summer here. And now we're staring down like a really bad El Nino year. And so this might be a fall kind of endeavor for me, because let me tell you what I'm not going to do when it's 120 degrees out. Be like, let me contemplate the end of the world via like ecological catastrophe.
Yeah. Well, it is a post-apocalyptic scenario, and I won't say much more than that. But yeah, I find it to be compulsively watchable. It's I wouldn't say it's prestige exactly.
It is not prestige.
No, it's fun. It's fun. It's pulpy. Yeah. It's propulsive.
It seems like something I will revisit at some point.
Yeah. There's always it's going at breakneck speed. There's just tons of plot happening. Yes. They're not holding anything back. This is not a slow burn. So yeah, you just gotta strap in and go where it takes you. And it's 8 episodes per season, and the second season is midway through right now. Okay. It'll be over by the end of the month. But season 2 does broaden things in a compelling way, I would say. Anyway, point is, it's a baseball show. And I don't really remember that much baseball in season 1, but it's been a while since I watched season 1. I watched it while it was airing. This is on Hulu, by the way. And season 2 immediately kicks in with a baseball reference, because they go around the table. It's one of those, like, what do you miss about civilization, essentially? And one guy's like, watching the Mets. Or it's like they have to say one thing they miss and one thing they don't miss. And so the guy says, the thing he misses is watching the Mets, and also the thing he doesn't miss is watching the Mets. So fair. And the baseball quotient really ramps up, though, in episode 5. And again, this is not a spoiler except for the baseball reference. But there's the Nick Castellanos meme is invoked in episode 5 of season 2. Of Paradise. Way. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah. So it turns out they have Mike Greenberg from ESPN, and there's this clip just before the disaster happens. And he just casually mentions that Nick Castellanos hit a walk-off home run the night before.
Nick Castellanos brought about the end of the world via ecological disaster?
In this scenario, Nick Castellanos ended the world.
We've seen it. They've got elite pitching. They have bats in the lineup. We just saw that clip of Castellanos hitting the walk-off home run last night. And I'm sorry, we have a breaking news development.
This is some serious ball knowing that's happening here. And I've tired of the Castellanos meme in most contexts, and we may not have to consider it all that much, because I don't know how many more home runs Nick Castellanos is going to hit. But that in particular, just the stretching of it, because this is like actual Castellanos meme. It became like people were stretching. People were trying to find some sort of tragedy or disaster that had happened every single time Nick Castellanos hit a home run. And it was like, come on, like this is, you've taken this too far. Yeah. You're beating a dead horse here. Like this is, it's over for me. But this, in this context where I was not expecting it at all, I was quite impressed, and I think I would count it if Nick Castellanos precipitated the apocalypse. I think that would be an okay use of the meme.
Do you think he knows?
I would guess so. I would guess someone let him know. He's obviously aware of the meme, but I got a message from Sam Miller, who wanted to know whether I was aware of this, whether I had been alerted, and I had. I guess he's watching it too. But Sam said most shows don't know enough about baseball. This one arguably knows too much. So for him, it might be too much of a baseball show. Like this might be too much of a wink or a nod or something. And, you know, there's lots of like Philly sports references going on in this, because it turns out before the apocalypse, everything was coming up Philly, and the Eagles were doing great. And just, you know, the Sixers it was like the year of Philly, and then the apocalypse struck, which that's funny. No. But this show was created by Dan Fogelman, who also created This Is Us. And so some people say that this is like sci-fi This Is Us. I didn't really watch This Is Us, so I can't testify to that.
Sterling K. Brown was also in This Is Us, right?
Yeah. So
and Milo died from a pressure cooker. Is that right? There was a pressure cooker related explosion.
Yeah. So, but Dan Fogelman is also the creator of much-loved baseball drama Pitch.
No way!
Yes. So he has been a baseball knower for a decade, for years, for quite a while. Wow. So we loved Pitch, R.I.P. Sad, Pitch, just a single season, but we talked a lot about it at the time and did interviews on this podcast and everything. And, and reminisced about it and wished that it had continued. But yeah, baseball knower, baseball show, that was like by any definition a baseball show, an explicitly baseball show, but Paradise also is clearing the bar here, I think, quite comfortably. Even, you know, at Effectively Wild, we'll take anything as evidence of being a baseball show, but Paradise...
Oh, yeah, our bar is very low.
Yeah, Paradise is clearing that bar quite easily. So I'd recommend the show. I enjoy it, but also I am excited to see what other baseball references are in store for us in the rest of this season.
Wow. Oh, it feels like a lot to put on Nick Castellanos' shoulders.
It does.
You know, like maybe too much. I mean, I know that he didn't exactly leave under great terms in Philly, but surely he isn't trying to bring about the end of the world or anything like that.
I don't think so. Yeah, no. He wasn't thrilled with Rob Thompson, but I don't think that he wanted to end civilization as we know it. So, but it was inadvertent, I'm sure. Anyway, we talked about Castellanos on the Phillies preview this time, and bet you didn't expect Castellanos to come up in this context on this episode. But it's unpredictable. What I can predict is that we are about to preview the Atlanta Braves with Grant McAuley and the White Sox with James Fegan. So let's take a quick break, and we'll be back to do that. Okay, it is time to talk about the Atlanta Braves, and once again, we are joined by Grant McAuley, a man of many jobs and speaking gigs. He is a Braves reporter for 92.9 The Game. He also does From the Diamond. He does some writing for Cobb County's Marietta Daily Journal. He has another new show called Wax Packing Nostalgic. He opens baseball cards, which is all the rage these days. Grant, welcome back.
Thank you guys for having me. And yeah, I've managed to pick up yet another show, just kind of taking my hobby and turning it into just something else to do, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's kind of what we do too. But you can find all of Grant's stuff at FromTheDiamond.com, which I will link to, of course. But before I do the final plugs, we have to talk a little bit about the Braves. And if we had talked to you first at the very beginning of this series, I think probably the tone might have been a bit different than it is now toward the end, because it has not been the best spring training for the Braves, from afar at least. In terms of wins and losses, I guess it's been great. But who pays attention to the standings in the Grapefruit and Cactus League? I didn't know until I checked that the Braves are actually 12-5. They have the second best winning percentage in all of baseball in the spring. And number one is the Washington Nationals, which tells you a little bit about how predictive that is. Not especially. But when it comes to who's actually available and who will be playing for the Braves once the games, quote unquote, count, well, it's fewer guys than it looked like it would be at the start of spring. And there has been seemingly sort of a Groundhog Day, here we go again. This can't all be happening the way that it happened last year when there were so many injuries and suspensions and everything got derailed. And it was one of the most disappointing seasons. And Ha-Seong Kim hurt, Joey Wentz, Hurston Waldrop, Spencer Schwellenbach, Jurickson Profar out again, this time for the entire season. So am I reading the vibes right that perhaps Braves fans not thrilled with the way things were going?
Yeah, I mean, there's really no sugarcoating that when you look at the events, if you will, of spring training, that it doesn't have you feeling all warm and fuzzy about starting a new baseball season, because it does feel like a continuation of 2025 when, you had pitching injuries galore. Your entire opening day rotation ended up on the 60-day IL at some point. Some of those guys are going to find themselves right back on the 60-day IL. In the case of Spencer Schwellenbach, Hurston Waldrop, meanwhile, will find himself on the 60-day IL for the first time, which is not really a box he wanted to check this year, and not really one that the Braves could afford if we're talking about quality pitching depth. You throw in Joey Wentz, who may not have been like a heralded member of the pitching, plans, but he was at the very least quality depth the Braves were hoping. He blows his ACL in a collision covering first base. I mean, the Braves, in a lot of ways, as far as injuries are concerned, would have no luck except for bad luck, because we can look at Spencer Strider, we can look at Ronald Acuna Jr., Austin Riley 2 years in a row, Ozzie Albies has had several broken bones the past few years. It's just the list goes on and on. Ha-Seong Kim, gets hurt away from the field in the offseason of all things, right after signing a deal to come back. So
slipped on some ice.
Right. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, I guess is how the phrase goes. But unfortunately for the Braves, the cherry on top of all that bad news was Jurickson Profar once again, the consequences of his own actions. And I think it's just so many things, and none of them are good when it comes to the Jurickson Profar situation. We can pick it apart if you guys want to. I've got the time for it, certainly, but it's inexcusable. I'll put it that way. That's the one word that I would put on his portion of what has transpired for the Braves this spring. Things that, you couldn't afford, things that when you come in with such a tenuous grasp on hoping for the best as far as health is concerned, but knowing to prepare for the worst the last few years. And oh, by the way, new manager, new coaching staff, a lot of other things have changed here, but the expectation for the Braves remains the same. Play a good season of baseball and get into October and try to win in the playoffs. And they missed that last year for the first time since 2017. So I think they're hungry to get back. They're going to have to overcome some obstacles. And I think they've got a group that's capable of doing it. And the talent still on paper, where the game is certainly not played, is there. But goodness gracious, could you at least get to opening day without having to mark guys off of what you would hope would be your opening day roster?
Yeah, I don't want to linger over long on the Profar stuff because we have other guys to talk about who will be playing for the Braves. But I'm curious, if you've noted any conversation going on within the front office from a process perspective, not that it is their responsibility solely. Obviously, he made a bad choice twice here, but they did sign him to a 3-year deal on the strength of one very good but somewhat unusual season. Has this caused any sort of reflection on their part in terms of how they're vetting potential free agents or how they're assessing makeup?
I guess I would answer that question with a question, which is, how could it not? I mean, you don't want to assume the worst because somebody has a good year. And let's kind of look at Jurickson Profar for what it was. It was a good season. It was an all-star season for him, but it didn't make him one of the best players in baseball. He was still a late winter sign, but it looked like, based on the underlying metrics and, what you felt like was repeatable, that it was a risk worth taking in terms of the 3-year contract and the money, $42 million. Ultimately, he's, at best going to make half of that. So if there's a tiny silver lining, maybe that's it. But the headaches, the stress, the things that it's cost the team in both, manpower on the field and the front office, as you mentioned, having to, look into this and maybe do some introspection on, how exactly did this happen? I mean, I will put the blame squarely on the shoulders of the one person that caused it, and that's Jurickson Profar. Sure. It was the HCG. in 2025. And then this year it was a basically testosterone replacement therapy. And these are things that are not on Major League Baseball's permissible list of things. These guys know this. Everybody, I think, is aware. The athlete saying, I would never knowingly, that whole conversation, I mean, there may be a guy out there that pertains to, but by and large, everyone's tired of hearing that. There's just no excuse for it. And when it happens twice in basically 11 months, I don't know how you can point to anybody other than Jurickson Profar, and I don't really know that anybody's making the case, but the frustration, yeah, you can point at the front office a little bit and say, come on, guys, like, did you not see maybe some red flags here? I mean, now you start to hear the rumblings or the whispers, and maybe they're not whispers anymore, but the Padres were buyer beware, so they let Profar go, and they were happy with their decision to do so, and now they're vindicated and not bringing him back. But I don't know. It's all the hindsight's 2020 kind of thing, but ultimately, and Walt Weiss said this, I mean, we got to go onward. We can't dwell on it. His teammates didn't, belabor the point. They basically said, they're disappointed, but we have to focus on what we've got inside this clubhouse and a job that we still have to do. And I don't know that you could expect anything different from this Braves team. I feel like they are truly a team of pros, and they are a team that does care a lot about each other, one to another, just from what I've been able to note over the years. So certainly there's some disappointment there that may not have all been publicly aired out there with the appeal still pending.
Sure.
But Jurickson Profar has created an incredibly, incredibly difficult situation for the Braves and a headache that they could have done without at the very least.
And I guess they'll have to figure out what to do going into 2027.
Yeah,
Do you count on him? Third time's the charm. This time, surely he won't get suspended again. And then how will he even play at that point after that long a layoff? And he played okay for the Braves last year, not quite at the prior Padres level, but not bad. But then I guess you're questioning whether that was real or mirage too. But, that's you can cross that bridge when you get there.
And I'd honestly say this. I think he's played his last game in a Braves uniform because I don't know how you walk that guy back into the clubhouse with any ounce or shred of credibility.
Yeah. Well, in the short term, how do they fill in for him? Right now, Roster Resource at FanGraphs has Dominic Smith listed at DH. So what does this do to the depth? Are they going to be in the market for a Profar replacement still?
It certainly hurts the depth. I mean, you were counting on this guy as a switch hitter, and he was going to be a featured bat in the lineup. And I don't want to pull a Dennis Miller and get off on a rant here, but I didn't really understand giving Profar leadoff at bats and at bats in the second spot of the order, regardless of him being a switch hitter with decent on-base skills. Decent, not great, certainly good in his best year, which was on the wrong side of 30. But without relitigating all of that, I look at Ronald Acuna Jr. as the guy who should be getting the most plate appearances on the team. And I don't think I'm crazy for saying that. And I think Walt Weiss agrees with that. It was kind of the necessity that the Braves shuffled their lineup around last year and moved Acuna down to try to get more run production going because it's a guy that can affect the game, and you'd love for him to do it with a bunch of guys on base. So I understand exploring that, but the Braves' ideal lineup to me never included Jurickson Profar in really the top 4 hitters, possibly the top 5 hitters, because I think Acuna, Drake Baldwin, Matt Olson, and Austin Riley are the hitters that I would feature the most to get the most plate appearances in whatever order makes the most sense there, with Acuna leading the way and figure out the other 8 spots in the lineup. But a Profar replacement, I think, is not, I mean, there's nobody out there that's of any real interest from the free agent standpoint that moves the needle. I mean, you brought in Dominic Smith, who had a decent little run with the Giants last year, and maybe he could be a useful player, but you're not going to count on him to play in the outfield. He wasn't particularly great at that, and the guy that plays first base never takes a day off for the Braves, and Matt Olson. So maybe a little bit of DH there. But one thing that Walt Weiss is going to do, I think, differently than Brian Snitker is utilize this DH spot to move some guys into it to get them off their feet from the field. Guys like Ronald Acuna Jr., Austin Riley, Ozzie Albies. I mean, whoever it may be. I mean, Mike Yastrzemski is, I think, going to be an important signing now for the Braves. Not that he wasn't already, because they had terrible outfield production last year with only half a year of Acuna, a bad season from Michael Harris, and Profar's suspension really hurting their outfield production as well. So I think that you might see the catchers, Sean Murphy once he's healthy, and Drake Baldwin trade some at-bats at DH as well. But ultimately, the Braves believed with Profar in place and the ability to mix and match and move some guys to the DH spot that they didn't really need to pursue Marcell Ozuna, for example, and have him back in the DH spot. But Profar not being part of the deal changes some things. I don't know if it's really going to change everything altogether that much if you have healthy and productive hitters named Ronald Acuna Jr., Austin Riley, Ozzie Albies, Michael Harris. Those are the guys you look at last year. You didn't either have a full year from them or they did not have the year that they're accustomed to having and that the Braves need them to have this year. And I think the Braves could make up for their DH spot in the aggregate once they have Murphy back in place, especially.
Well, of that group, maybe we can start with Harris because his season was really a tale of two halves. He was terrible at the plate in the first half of 47 WRC plus, which is barely playable even for a guy at a premium position, and then a 130 in the second half. So what adjustments did you see him make, and sort of where are you expecting his 2026 production to land between those two extremes?
Yeah, and it's been kind of this roller coaster ride with Harris, but never more so than last year, because we didn't point at and say, well, he was battling an injury, because in 2024, he was battling an injury. In 2023, he dealt with a back injury early in the season as well. But last year, he was healthy and just struggling and struggling to figure it out. And what he ended up doing was something that was, he worked a lot with Tim Hires. I talked to Harris about this at length, and they had some ideas of things they wanted to change, but Michael was kind of hesitant to pull the trigger on it because he just believed that he was going to be able to work through it. But this dry spell, this slump, if you will, the struggles just kept going and going and going. And finally, I think Chipper Jones ran into Michael Harris's father in the premium seating level behind home plate and said, hey, you can have Michael call me. And Chipper, I think, reiterated and communicated some of the same things that Michael had been thinking about and that they had been kind of working through behind the scenes. And the timing was just, hey, I've got to do something different. I've got to change something. So the big thing that he did was move his hands from down kind of in front of his body or parallel to his body, much like Ronald Acuna Jr.'s hands are, which was an adjustment he made about 2 to 3 weeks into the big leagues. And he brought them back up. And if you look at film from his minor league days and even his first 2 to 3 weeks as an Atlanta Brave, his hands were up behind his head. So he moved that up and he just seemed to be able to strike through the ball and really, I think, affect the kind of contact that he wanted to make at a much higher level. So we saw just ridiculous hot streak that started to turn his season around, but the walks are still not there. I think that's the big thing for him. He doesn't draw really any walks to speak of. And even if it's just a 7, 8, 9% walk rate, that would be an improvement over what we were seeing last year. And I think that it would start to allow pitchers to realize that he is maybe a little bit more selective and that he's not just going to make contact at his own expense and rolling it over. And he doesn't strike out a ton, but he's just making contact that doesn't serve him or the team. And I think I've seen some in spring training adjustments to that, a little bit more patience. As Ben, you pointed out, it's spring training. What can we really take from these numbers and these records? I don't know. It's all anecdotal. But if he is walking a little bit more and working at bats, I think we can start to see the kind of Michael Harris that was the Rookie of the Year and had at least good seasons in 2023 and 2024.
Well, shortstop's been an issue for a while, and only the Rockies got less production out of their shortstops last season by FanGraphs WAR than Atlanta did. So they thought they had addressed that with Kim. Not so fast, or at least not yet. The nice thing about signing Mauricio Dubon is that he can be your backup at a bunch of positions, and now he'll be pressed into service as the starter. So what's roughly the timeline for Kim and the outlook for him when he does return? And then would you be able to shift Dubon back to some sort of super utility role at that point?
Yeah, I think you could, certainly, because Dubon, he's won Gold Gloves as a utility player, so that's something the Braves like, is having that good defensive component. And maybe there's a little upside in the bat, but he's not a guy that's going to be really a game changer. But if he could just make some regular contributions at the plate wherever he's playing, that would be useful. And I think Dubon can be a useful player in that regard. But for Ha-Seong Kim, it looks like he's going to miss the month of April, but a return in early to mid-May, I think, is possible. But nothing's really been set in stone here. And the Braves have kind of been, over the past few years, especially with injuries, kind of hesitant to put a timetable out there because they don't want to have to explain if the player needs an extra day or an extra week or an extra whatever. Hey, this is not a huge setback. He's just not there yet. So I think that it's realistic to look at the middle of May for Ha-Seong Kim to be back in there as we sit here right now. And that would be, I think, probably the best case scenario. And he is a guy that defensively brings a lot, offensively brings more than they were getting from Nick Allen last year, who was a great defender, but little else. And I think you have to get more out of that position. And they've really struggled to, by and large, since Dansby Swanson left.
I feel like we should emphasize a positive note. We've been very dour so far. It's been a rough time. So let's talk about Drake Baldwin.
Yeah.
Because it's impressive enough for a catcher to have a 125 WRC plus. It's especially impressive when that catcher is a rookie and when he is competent behind the plate. So talk to us about what you saw from Drake Baldwin. I know what I saw from Drake Baldwin because he got my Rookie of the Year vote. But how did he sort of work through the adjustment to the majors, and what do you see as his developmental goals for 2026?
Yeah, I think with Drake Baldwin, there's a work ethic there that put him in position to take on an incredible responsibility that he did not expect when he showed up for spring training last year. I remember talking to Drake Baldwin that first week, and he was excited to be in big league camp. He'd learned a lot over the past couple of years from Sean Murphy, from Travis d'Arnaud. He gave a lot of credit to Sandy Leon in his time in AAA and some of the other veteran players that the Braves had around there for getting him ready for what the major league responsibilities are. And he's a guy that he makes great contact. He hits to all fields. He obviously has power. He can be a run producer. All of that, plus the ability to put in the time, the effort, and the energy to handle a major league pitching staff. I felt like he handled himself as well or better than anybody could have realistically imagined last year. And a great vote for the Rookie of the Year, by the way, because I think he was the guy.
Yeah,
and
it wasn't a hard one.
Yeah, no, not at all. And there's another level, I think, for him. Is it fair to ask for it to just, explode into superstardom the very next year? I don't know. But if he's able to just do many of the things that he did last year from a preparation and execution standpoint, as a signal caller behind the plate, and as a very high aptitude hitter, I think that he's going to be just fine. And I don't think sophomore slumps are really as pronounced as they were, years back. I think we've got so much information on both sides now that the game is just constantly in flow of that info and making those adjustments quicker and quicker. And I think Drake's a guy that is very much aware of all the information and very much hungry to learn as much as he possibly can. And I think that's one of the things that puts him in a great position behind the plate, which the Braves are very high on, and of course at the plate, where I think, and looking at this, and not to belabor the point, but you can bat Jurickson Profar second if you want to. I've never managed a major league game, but when I look at the upside and the ability of Drake Baldwin, I'm not worried about what his foot speed is or him clogging the bases. Get on base all you want. Knock some guys in, do some big things, change the game with your bat because you're capable of doing it. Let's get that guy as many plate appearances as possible because I think he can be an impact bat.
Apologies to any Giants fans who've been hollering for the last 15 minutes that I slighted their spring training record because the Giants are 15-3 this spring. So I was looking at the Grapefruit League standings. The Giants in the Cactus League, they actually have the best record in all of baseball in spring training. Again, maybe that says something about the predictiveness of these records. But while we're talking about catchers, maybe we can talk briefly about Sean Murphy, who was just one of the more perplexing players in baseball over the past few years. And then I guess we kind of got an answer to the riddle, which was that he was hurt the entire time. He was hiding an injury. He hadn't told anyone, including the team, which was frustrating, I think, just to read about, because if he could have gotten this issue taken care of. I get kind of gutting through a physical issue for a little while if you don't think the team has a better option or something. But especially if you've made your money already, get some help, right? So he seemed to perhaps sabotage himself and maybe the team. I guess the upside would be that if the hip surgery for the torn labrum has taken care of the issue that was plaguing him that entire time, well, maybe he'll be back to the kind of bat he was before. And maybe as long as Baldwin is sort of entrenched at catcher, then that helps you with the DH issue that we were talking about before. So take us through that whole saga and what the team thought about that revelation and how he handled that and what you think the realistic outlook is for him post-surgery.
So something I've learned just from being around athletes or really baseball players, and I guess for John Kruk, maybe that's not the same thing, but for the purposes of what we're talking about, athletes have this way of I think, the guys that are really committed to their craft. I mean, there's obviously Anthony Rendone's and other cases here, but of gutting through stuff, even when it's probably discretion would be the better part of valor, but they're going to go out there and be the walking wounded. And I think for Sean Murphy, he may not have been able to, be the hitter that he wanted to be. I don't think that's in dispute. There was some power, a little bit of run production, but incredibly low batting averages and not even coming close to being a really productive hitter, getting on base and being consistent whatsoever. However, when he was working with the staff benefited greatly from having Sean Murphy behind the plate. So I think he felt a responsibility there. I think, to your point, and to play devil's advocate, he looked at that contract as, yes, I've got my money, but I got to go out there and earn it. I don't think he was worried at all about I'm going to lose my spot. I'm going to get Wally pipped by Drake Baldwin. I think that Sean Murphy, counter to that, is actually one of those people, especially from working with Travis d'Arnaud for a number of years, that believes that we succeed more so together than by my individual success outshining your individual success. So I know that there's a lot of different ways to look at it, and I'm not going to tell anybody that, hey, he was right to do what he did. I think in hindsight, maybe take a different route, knowing what we know now, especially when things are already not going particularly well for the team. But then I kind of swing back and say, well, maybe he saw everything else falling apart and thought, I can't tap out now. I got to go out there and do more. So that's kind of my read on it. And I know it's disappointing, clearly. And I've had so many people in my mentions in social media say, Alex Anthopoulos blew it with this trade, giving away William Contreras and getting Sean Murphy and extending Sean Murphy. And look, Murphy has brought some value, but there have been peaks and there have been valleys to his time. I will say, I don't think that the Braves thought that there was any development left for William Contreras, the catcher. And the Brewers said, we'll take that bet. And they were able to get more out of him. And obviously, he's become a really good player. And that's great for him. But Sean Murphy getting this surgery, to get more to the point here, is something that I think should benefit him. It sounds like he's making all the progress that he needs to. And the Braves are hoping to have him back perhaps sometime, maybe mid to late May could be in play for him as well, around the same time that Ha-Seong Kim is coming back. But they're not going to rush him. They do have Drake Baldwin. They signed Jonah Heim, who's a pretty quality catcher. Sandy Leon is back in a minor league level if you need a veteran backup catcher for any length of time. Chadwick Tromp re-signed with the Braves. So there's some, I'd say, good depth, adequate depth behind Drake Baldwin. But Sean Murphy does have a lot of power. And if you're able to get that 20-homer bat back in there, all of a sudden you're not really worried about the fact that Marcell Ozuna is a Pittsburgh Pirate. And more to the point, the Jurickson Profar is going to be sitting on his couch for the next 162 games.
I tend to think of Matt Olson and Austin Riley as sort of a pair, the once and future, or at least once and hopefully present Ironmen of this team. I'm heartened to hear that some of these guys might get some time off their feet through the course of a season. Seems like a prudent course correction for a team that's underperformed of late. But these seasons diverged, right? Matt Olson might not have achieved the high highs he has in the past, but sort of a return to form, 136 WRC plus. He played all 162. Austin Riley's season didn't really take the same shape, and obviously he missed a bunch of time. So how are you thinking about these guys this year? How much do you think they will each play, and how much do you think sort of load management might end up being a part of the narrative for each of them this season?
Yeah, that's the operative word. When I talked to Walt Weiss in the winter meetings, he basically said, we do want to kind of do the load management, and I think it could be beneficial. And it's not, we're trying to give guys 10 games off. It's not, I think the NBA paradigm where, your star players are probably already missing 8 to 10 games a year. And, these guys, they benefit, I think, from playing every day. It's a rhythm kind of sport. And Matt Olson, I don't think you're going to see him end his consecutive game streak on his own accord anytime soon. I don't think you're going to see Walt Weiss do that either. But will it make sense to maybe have a Matt Olson day at DH? Absolutely. I think that could make sense once every couple of 3-4 weeks, whatever the case is. I mean, he is a good glove too, so they like having him out there for that. But with Austin Riley, I feel like he's just been snake bit by injuries. It was the broken hand. He got hit by the pitch in 2024. Last year, he had a double sports hernia surgery. I talked to him after that. He had tried to gut through the first one that he knew about. He went out to play in that NASCAR-themed game that Major League Baseball had the Braves and Reds playing, and the Speedway Classic, I think it was called. and it rained cats and dogs, and they were playing on this makeshift field, and he slipped diving for a ball, and then the next day he tried to win a foot race with Ellie De La Cruz in a rundown, and that was probably a tactical error, and he said as much. But you're the competitor. You're out there trying to make the play, but he felt his body, just telling him, like, look, it's done. And he'd already missed time with it. He got the sports hernia surgery on I believe that was the left side, and they looked and they said, hey, we're going to correct the right side while we're at it because it's going to go soon too. And his doctor said, you can get back to playing baseball in 6 to 8 weeks. Unfortunately, that was the end of the baseball season for the Atlanta Braves. But he came into spring training fully healthy. I think Austin had really been in the lab working very hard with Tim Hires and company, figuring out how to get his swing back in line with where he wanted it to be. He said he was getting too steep to the ball. He was driving it, but it wasn't getting, I think, the distance that he needed it to get. Strikeouts are always going to be a part of his game, but when he gets locked in, he's a guy that I think can carry a team from a run production standpoint. He was a 5+ WAR third baseman, I think, from 21 to 23. You got to look at that as something that's still in the tank when he's on the right side of 30, and I think that's there. Matt Olson, to me, is a 30 and 100 guy who's capable of pushing a 900 OPS and doing a lot of big things. He hasn't done that in a couple of years, but I think that's still in there. And if those guys are clicking and they have the power and the run production numbers and they are healthy and they're getting their at-bats, this Braves team, to go back to that phrase I used earlier, can make up for some of their losses, personnel losses, in the aggregate by having some guys they expected more out of actually return to form. And Austin Riley may be the top guy on that list for me.
And that takes us to the last two guys in the lineup, Albies and Acuna. And Acuna really raked last year on the whole. I wonder what you think the shape of his production will be this year. Have we seen the last of him as a super speedster? Would you expect the offensive level he spent last season at to be the baseline for him, basically? And then as for Albies, you mentioned all the broken bones. He almost made it through last season without another one and then didn't quite get there. Little left hamate fracture just at the end of the season, missed a week or so. So that was the good news, that he played 157 games, which was his most since 2019. The bad news was that it was his career worst WRC plus. And also the defense is graded out below average according to StatCast for a few years now. So the overall production really 3 of the past 4 years has not been what you want from him. So take us through those two guys and then we can talk some pitching.
All right, well, let's talk about Ozzie Albies first, because I think he's the guy that is looking to prove a little bit more from the production standpoint. And he was it was Michael Harris and Ozzie Albies in the lineup last year over the first 3 months, that it was just neither one of them were doing the things you needed them to do. And when you were looking at injury to Austin Riley and the absence of Ronald Acuna Jr. for the better part of, about half the season as well, all told, it was kind of difficult to watch those guys struggle. And for Ozzie, it's been a broken wrist. He's had a broken foot. He's broken the hamate bone. I mean, he's been through it. But I did feel like that last 50 or so games of the season, he was starting to really find it again. The power was there. He was just a more productive version of himself. And then he fractures the hamate bone. So no luck, but bad luck maybe in some cases. But I think that he is over that and ready to go out and prove that he can build on what they discovered in the final couple of months of last year. And when healthy, I mean, there are not a ton of second basemen that can put up the kind of numbers that he has in the past. And I'll point at him too and say, hey, he's on the right side of 30. So you would think that that's still in the tank there, even if the defense hasn't necessarily been something that has made up for some of the trouble at the plate the way that, say, Michael Harris did last year. But with Ronald Acuna Jr., I think that what you saw last year, if you look at it on a per 162 basis, was pushing some of the same norms of his 2023 MVP season, with the exception of stolen bases. He played in the Winter League again this year. He was running amok there. He came to spring training and pronounced himself 200% ready to play physically. I think we're going to see more stolen bases from Ronald. I think we're going to see more stolen bases from the Braves in general, because Antoine Richardson, who came over from the New York Mets, is kind of there, I think, to help the Braves take advantage of some of the things that maybe they had not in the past, because some of the guys would have a reputation as being slow and plodding and not really stolen base threats. But look what he did with the Mets last year. When you look at the sprint speed of that team, it wasn't a bunch of speed merchants, but all of a sudden these guys were stealing bases, and they were doing so with a high success rate. So I think that's something the Braves are trying to build in. So if you want to see Austin Riley maybe push himself to double-digit steals, this could be your year. I don't know about that for Matt Olson or Drake Baldwin or some of these other guys, but Ronald Acuna Jr., Ozzie Albies, Michael Harris, those are guys that I would expect to see doing some running. Maybe some others here and there situationally. We'll see an uptick there, and that could help. But look, Ronald, to me, it's the Reggie Jackson quote. He's the straw that stirs the drink. As he goes offensively, I think the Braves have a chance to, kind of follow suit. So if he's back and at his full MVP luster and playing at 200% this year, maybe Shohei Ohtani will have some actual, real competition for that National League MVP award.
Okay, we fibbed a little bit. We are going to get to the pitching, but before we do, I have to ask sort of a broader depth question on the position player side, because we ran our Braves top prospect list recently, and we were struck by how pitcher heavy this system is. There's a lack of depth in the major leagues behind the rotation, but there's a little bit to work with in the minors. That's not as true on the position player side. So if any of these guys go down with injury, who are some of the guys sort of floating around double or triple A who you might expect to get some big league run?
So I don't expect a lot of prospects to necessarily fill those voids. I think it's going to be some of the minor league deals that they've signed and guys that, don't make the club in spring training, that you don't have to cut them loose. They don't have an out, or they just agree to play, and you can make the 40-man move when you need to. The Braves don't want to talk about that or think about that, but clearly they've planned by bringing in some veteran guys. But you're right. It's a very pitcher-dominated top prospect list. The Braves have gotten back to what I think a lot of clubs would do, but certainly Atlanta, when its minor league system was arguably at its best, would get its arms through the draft and would get all the position players and the real talented, toolsy, position guys, I guess, in general, from the international side, but many of those have not panned out. They did go out and draft a bunch of shortstops at the top of the list. I think Alex Lodice is probably the one that could push his way maybe into the picture if you needed to, but it's going to mean something went really wrong on the infield if he's up getting regular at bats. So I don't know if that'll be the case, but yeah, I wish I could tell you that there are 3 or 4 guys that are knocking on the door, and I'm sure the Braves wish I could tell you that too. But I think it's just one of those, we're going to have to figure it out when we get there, but we're hoping to have the plan A actually get to play out in a more favorable fashion than it has the past couple years.
So there is most of a starting rotation on the IL, and on the IL for some time in Schwellenbach and Waldrop and Wentz and AJ Smith-Shawver, who's working his way back from June Tommy John surgery. So you're really counting on the guys who are still standing here to keep standing. And Chris Sale's been just so fantastic since the Braves acquired him. They extended him, of course. And, you look historically at Chris Sale and you can't exactly count on him to be an innings eater, but of late he has been by Brave standards. But it really would help if you could get Spencer Strider back to the guy he was before the surgery. And the stats look fine, decent this spring. I know early on he was trying not to pay attention to the velo, and probably people who had him on their fantasy team were also trying not to pay attention to the velo. But how has that evolved over the course of the spring? How is he looking? And is there a hope for the ace, one of the best pitchers in baseball type guys that he was before the surgery, to return?
I think there is. And Spencer's a guy that, the Braves have a lot of these type of players that, they are hopelessly, committed to trying to get the most out of themselves and have very high expectations of their production. So when Spencer Strider struggled to be Spencer Strider last year, I don't think anybody was more troubled by it than he was, because he couldn't heat up the top of the strike zone at 99 and 100 miles an hour. Now, could he touch 96, 97 at times? Yeah. Was his average fastball velocity still very good? Yes, but it wasn't elite anymore. And more so, I think and some people have kind of pointed to this, is his arm slot changed and the vertical movement of his fastball was not where it needed to be, I think, to have the same result, even if it's not coming out of his hand with quite as much velocity. But he has been able to, and I think that this is probably prudent for him, because you look at having the surgery, doing the rehab, then pitching a full season of baseball, including the rehab starts and all his major league time. He basically didn't put down the baseball for 13 months. until this winter. So having a normal winter for him, I think, was a big part of just recharging his body, recalibrating. He's been in the lab trying to figure all of those things out. He looks for all the data points that he can possibly get from the physical standpoint of tracking everything. I mean, this is a guy that's just, if there's information to be had about how he's performing and what it is that is going into his performance that he can adjust, Spencer Strider's the guy that's going to find that info and look to do something with it. So I think seeing him at 95, 96 in his last start is obviously more of what you expect to see from him. But fastball was elite. His slider was elite. That third pitch coming along, is it the curveball? I think that's probably the best third pitch offering for him, but he's also dabbled with that changeup. So maybe we start to see a little bit of a different version of Spencer Strider, who's able to kind of rely on being more of the pitcher than the thrower. I talked to John Smoltz in 2023 when Strider broke his single-season strikeout record for the club, and Smoltz said, I feel like there's something there for him to take another step and to learn a little bit more about the pitching side of things as he gets more experience in the league, and I'm excited to see that. Nobody wanted to see another arm injury, no doubt about that. But I think coming out of this and through this, there's no better candidate to take what he's supposed to from it and find success in different ways than Spencer Strider. And that obviously, it would be huge for the Braves. Chris Sale, though, to your point, I don't think I can add much to that, has been everything the Braves could have asked for. The only real hiccup for him was back spasms in the fall of 2024. He wasn't available for that wild card series. And then obviously diving to preserve a perfect game bid, a shutout bid in the middle of the summer and cracking a rib. I mean, again, no luck, but bad luck for the Braves in 2025. They're just going to hope that changes and that Chris Sale just keeps doing the thing that he's done the last 2 years, because he has been strengthening what I think is now, in my mind, a Hall of Fame career.
Well, another guy who's hoping for some better luck is probably Ronaldo Lopez, who in 2024, it went great. The conversion to the rotation, fantastic. Maybe not as many innings as you would want, but that's what happens when you have a shoulder injury end your season. And then last year, 1 game, 5 innings. So what have you seen from Lopez so far this spring, and how much length do you think that they're actually going to be able to get out of him?
A pain-free Ronaldo Lopez, according to him, for the first time in 4 years. His shoulder is no longer bothering him. I think it was probably different managing it as a reliever. It was probably exacerbated by becoming a starting pitcher again, which, by the way, the Braves, I think he said, were the only team that really gave any credence to his desire to be a starter again. He had other big contract offers or multi-year contract offers to be a reliever, but the Braves, were open to him being a starter. And he said that his wife had really pushed him to, hey, if you think you can do this, you should really go all out and give it another shot. And he did. And he was an all-star. And he did have a good year. But the shoulder ultimately was problematic and cost him most of last year. So a pain-free Ronaldo Lopez, who I think is kind of ramping his fastball velocity up from the low to the maybe mid-90s by the time he gets all of his innings and all of his work done. And then as the season goes along, maybe we start to see that guy that can, push 97, 98 when he needs to, but more so can kind of live and get his work done with good movement and with good change of speeds and using the rest of his arsenal, because I was really impressed with that aspect of his game, especially from seeing him be kind of a failed starter with the White Sox who just had to become a reliever, and to find his way back to being not just a decent starting pitcher, but a very good one in 2024. I think that's still in there, and maybe I'm just kind of being blindly optimistic, because goodness knows we've seen everything go wrong the last couple of years. Why can't something go right? But I do think that this shoulder being pain-free is going to be a huge difference maker for Ronaldo Lopez. And to, say it again, broken record, Braves are certainly hoping so.
So you've got Grant Holmes, you've got Bryce Elder, and Atlanta fans don't need to be told that they're probably not going to get through the season just using the 5 guys who are on the rotation depth chart right now. So what happens when someone else goes down? I'll say if someone else goes down, but as Meg mentioned, there's a little more depth on the prospect side, pitching-wise perhaps. So who would be next up if necessary?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of guys. We saw Didier Fuentes briefly last year at 20 years old, and I will say this, and I don't think it's really that shocking of a revelation, that he was in the majors well ahead of when he was expected to be, and he learned some major league lessons from big league hitters about, how hard it is at this level. But I think that he's a guy with some swing and miss ability that could benefit from a little bit more development, but could also, come up and perhaps now that he's had some experience, work his way into the Braves pitching plans. He's one guy I'd look at. J.R. Ritchie's the guy that got a lot of conversation this spring, though, as he kind of blitzed through the minors last year and looked like he is a rotation candidate if they have to go that route and promote from within to fill a void in the rotation, which is something they know all about. The Hurston Waldrop injury was just really, I mean, it wasn't just injury. It was insult to injury for the rotation because he was kind of the saving grace in the second half last year, thrown into things like asked to come up because that Speedway Classic game got pushed into a second day because of a rain delay, and he pitched like he belonged. And I hate that he's having to go through an elbow surgery, but it's not a major one, but he's out of the plan. So that took a big bite out of the Braves' depth. The Joey Wentz injury, clearly that was not part of the Braves' plan either. But I think Grant Holmes is in a good spot. He chose to rehab his torn UCL and strengthen it. I think he talked to Aaron Nola, who went the same route with his, and believed that I've kind of been pitching through this thing for a while, and rather than shut myself down for 18 months, I'm going to try the rest and rehab route. And thus far, it looks like that could be the right decision, but we'll find out over the course of 162 games. So your depth isn't what you want it to be. Bryce Elder led your team in starts and in innings pitched, I believe, last year, and he's a bit of a roller coaster at times. But there were some things I saw in the last 6-7 weeks that gave me hope that, you know, maybe this is a guy that if he's your fifth starter and he's posting a, 4-ish ERA and at least keeping you in the game, you could do a lot worse. But if Bryce Elder is all of a sudden the last man standing, the Braves are in a pretty bad place, and they were there for quite a while in 2025.
Let's talk about the bullpen here. Iglesias back again. The big offseason addition here, though, is Robert Suarez. So talk to us about what they liked in Suarez and then how they're thinking about piecing this group together.
Yeah, and Suarez, obviously, I mean, you look at those numbers, you look at his arsenal, that's what they look like, as the old baseball saying goes. I know Brian Snitker used to say that all the time. If you're looking at a late-inning reliever, Robert Suarez is pretty much cut from that cloth. And, being able to team him with Raisel Iglesias, I know Iglesias has been one of the better closers, save the first 2 to 3 months of last year. And the Braves believe that he figured his things out, and it looked like he did over the final 3 months of last year. He was immaculate down the stretch in the second half. And, that's a job where I'm not as worried about the final 3 outs, though they are important, but what are you doing to get there? And they needed another impact arm, and Robert Suarez checks all the boxes there. And if you have a day where Raisel Iglesias is down, you've got a perfectly good alternative, an all-star type alternative to be able to come in and close games for you. So that's a great 1-2 punch. And then you just look at the way that the bullpen is built around them. I think that they've got some guys that they obviously believe are able to cover the innings that they need them to. Could Joey Wentz or Bryce Elder have been maybe a potential long guy for you? Possibly, but I don't think that they're necessarily looking at that. If you went out and got another starter, is Ronaldo Lopez or Grant Holmes a bullpen option for you? Potentially. But with Tyler Kinley coming back on a 1-year deal, with Dylan Lee being in place, and with some of the other pieces that they have overall, I think this is a solid bullpen, and it's a strength. And they wanted to build that out to be able to support this rotation. But as we saw last year, even if your bullpen has a bunch of good arms, if you got to overuse them, it's going to get overexposed and there's going to be problems. And the Braves, unfortunately, found out all about that in 2025 as well.
Well, the guy who's going to be making the calls to the bullpen, as you mentioned, is Walt Weiss. So take us through this hiring and, promotion and reconstituted coaching staff. There were a lot of adventurous, somewhat surprising managerial hires this past offseason. Walt Weiss wasn't really one of them. It's just kind of a traditional promote the longtime bench coach, retread guy who's had that gig before. It's been a decade since his term as the Colorado Rockies manager ended. It was a fairly forgettable 4-year stint. I guess when you're talking about the Rockies, forgettable is not the worst case scenario. So there's that. But what did they see in Weiss? Did they think that he's set up to have a better second turn at the helm?
Yeah, and there's a continuity thing that obviously was part of the hire. But I do believe that they went out and looked and canvassed, and ultimately they came back to Walt. And when I looked at him coming in as Brian Snitker's bench coach, 8 years ago, I kind of felt like, all right, well, that kind of makes sense because how long will Brian Snitker be the manager? It didn't seem like that was going to be as long a term as it was. I think that obviously that played out in a favorable fashion by and large. You got a World Series title and a whole bunch of playoff appearances. And, why not keep running that back for a while? But Walt Weiss is walking into a very different situation with the Atlanta Braves than he was with the Colorado Rockies. I mean, he told the story that he didn't even know that he wanted the Rockies job. He just took the interview because he thought it'd be good for him, and he got the job. But the Rockies are not the Atlanta Braves. They don't have this roster. They don't have the expectations that the Braves have, obviously, and they don't have the infrastructure. And I felt like they built just a really good and a kind of young coaching staff around Walt, who is a guy that I think understands the importance of bringing in all the info, but also believes it's equally important how we communicate that information to our players. Because, you got to go out on the field and get it done. And what advantages can we find inside all of the work that we do to get ourselves ready for the game? So he embraces that side of it, but he's a guy who was a grinder. He played for some winning teams in his career, including the Braves in the 90s, the Oakland Athletics, and he's a guy that played for some great managers. So I feel like the Braves found themselves what I'll call, dotingly a baseball guy to lead them, but somebody who's respected in that clubhouse, who understands the day-to-day, who doesn't have to go introduce himself to everybody because they already know him, and somebody who I think has been able to learn a ton through the experience that he's gotten in the last 8 years with this club to get him ready for his second managerial stint. And a fun guy to talk to about the game of baseball and the life that he's lived in and around it. I'm excited to see what he is able to do, what the Braves are able to do. It's never all on the manager. He doesn't usually get the credit when they win. He always gets the blame when they lose, depending on pitching changes or a variety of other things. But he's a guy that's up to it. He can handle the criticism and, I think brings the things that the Braves wanted to have in that job to lead this club.
All right. Well, what would constitute a successful season for the Braves in 2026? Obviously, got to be a rebound, a bounce back, but to what level?
Playoff appearance, I think, has always been the bar for the Atlanta Braves. It's not where they want to stay. They don't want to get just stuck at the bar. They want to get themselves to the actual party, and that means getting a deep run into October. They've dealt with all kinds of setbacks last year. 2024 was also a challenging year, but they at least were able to sign the guest book in October. They want way more than that. They expect way more than that. And quite frankly, Braves fans expect way more than that as well. So what will Alex Anthopoulos do to try to maybe add to this club when the time is right? Will it happen in the spring? I don't really know. There's an excess of money if you look at it with the Profar suspension once it's official. But is that dry powder for later in the season? Can you afford to wait for later in the season? Given what you saw last year, it's going to be an interesting line for the Braves to walk. But they have to have health, number one, first and foremost, to do the things that they want to do this year. That's true of all 30 teams. But for the Braves, I think more so, they have just learned, how difficult it can be to have that component going for you. If they have it, this is a talented club that I still think can win the National League East, and a club that expects to go on a run in October and have guys like Sale and Strider and hopefully Schwellenbach and others helping to lead them to a deep run. And, who knows what can happen from there. You just got to get in. And for the Braves, they're looking to get back there. And I think that is the only thing that constitutes a successful season for them is a trip back to the playoffs.
And one more thing, if people want to watch the Braves, how and where can they do that? Because it's going to be a little bit different. No more FanDuel Sports Network South. They have launched a new regional sports network, Braves Vision. And this made some sense to me just because the remnants of the TBS Superstation imprint and the Braves kind of being a regional force because of all those years when they were so accessible. So was that the thinking here, why they wanted to go this way?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's just kind of the collapse of the RSN model for a number of big league clubs that ultimately, it's like Thanos. It was just inevitable that we were going to have to change this thing, or it was going to change for them, and that's kind of what forced them there. But I think they are comfortable with the idea of doing this. I kind of feel like that was something that everybody was just waiting for the other shoe to drop, because I think that the Braves were looked upon as the most profitable of the group of teams that were under the FanDuel umbrella, and maybe they didn't want the other ones, but they still wanted the Braves. But did that make any sense for the Braves? And the bankruptcies and everything else were obviously something we don't have to get into and relitigate right now. But Yeah, I think that Braves.tv is where you can go find all the info. I cannot tell you that I am read up and a scholar on all of this yet. I think we're still waiting to see how they will interface with the television cable providers and carriers, but that component should be in place, and you should be able to, in-network, sign up for the Braves Vision package and have no blackouts and stream the 140 local broadcasts that'll be available this year. So that part I do know. As far as when they'll announce all the details, I'm going to let the Braves do that on their own time and hopefully at some point within the next couple of weeks because we got a season coming up.
And if you want to know where you can find Grant McAuley, I'm sure Grant can answer that question at least, but FromTheDiamond.com is a good place to find a bunch of his work, podcasts, and articles, writing, all collected together. You can also hear him on 92.9 The Game, whether you're local or you want to stream it. And he does other writing, as I mentioned, for the Marietta Daily Journal. He has a new show just launched in January called Wax Packing Nostalgic, where he opens baseball cards and you can watch and you can remember some guys. Anything else you care to plug?
No, that pretty much covers all the bases for me. I'll have my show, my 2-hour baseball show From the Diamond is local on 92.9 The Game and wherever you get your podcasts. It'll start on the 29th of March, so only, a couple of weeks away as well when baseball gets back. And I am going to start opening not just packs, but boxes of vintage baseball cards as well. I've got quite the cachet I'm sitting on here, and I'm excited to get into those.
Going to be breaking. All right.
Oh,
exciting.
Yeah.
Okay.
The big hits.
Yeah. Okay, well, hopefully the Braves won't take too many more hits before the season starts, at least. But it was a pleasure, as always, to talk to you. Thank you very much, Grant.
Yeah, thank y'all for having me.
And now we'll take one more quick break, and we'll be back with James Fegan to talk about the White Sox.
If baseball were different, how different would it be? Players growing third arms and infield with a tree. Anything is fair game, even Kike's dirty pants. And maybe if you're lucky, we'll cold call Bobby Chance. You never know precisely where it's gonna go. By definition, effectively wild.
All right, let's talk about the Chicago White Sox. As always, we have brought aboard James Fegan, who covers the White Sox for Sox Machine. Also covers prospects for FanGraphs. How about that? FanGraphs contributor, James Fegan, and is also contributing to this podcast. Welcome, James.
Thank you for having me. I feel uniquely prepared as there are gusts of 55 miles an hour in my fair city today. As a child, my parents explained to me that it's not called the Windy City for the wind, but I always found that baffling because it's windy here all the time. It should definitely just to be about both windy politicians and conditions.
Yeah, it can be both. Why not? It seems to apply either way. And the White Sox, they've been buffeted by the trials and travails of the big leagues over the past couple seasons. But, I got to say, I'm kind of looking forward to this preview segment. Not that I don't always look forward to having you on the show, but, sometimes it's kind of like sensing your mental health and how you're doing. And like, are you questioning career choices? And can you actually make it through another season? And we'll assess how you sound as we proceed here. But I personally I'm kind of looking forward to watching some White Sox baseball this season. And maybe this is just a little irrational exuberance coming off of a mere 102 loss season instead of a 121 loss season. But, they made some moves. They've got some young talent. They're looking feisty. Am I overselling the feistiness of this squad?
Time will tell. I would say that in terms of you mostly got me thinking about my mental health, which I think is still in question, but it's more like it's less like, why are you doing this to yourself? And more like, are you going to let these people like get you worked up again? Like, it was not that long ago that everything they said fell apart in front of you. Why are you getting excited about like a humble, but I guess meaningfully productive off season where you like measurably did things, even if like we are the significance of them, like, if we were like scrutinizing them to a real degree, they'd have some holes, but we were just excited that you saw every weak spot in your roster and said, we'd add a player here. That seems like the thing to do, right? And we're like, yes.
Yeah, I don't want to oversell it too much here because this is the penultimate preview pod, and they do have the second worst win total projection according to the FanGraphs depth charts next to the Rockies. So I'm not saying that they are quite ready to turn the proverbial corner or be good again. I'm just saying they might be interesting, at least more interesting than they've been in some time. So that's something. And maybe the most interesting player coming off of this winter is Munetaka Murakami. And I was a believer, I think, relative to the consensus, but I do understand the obvious dings and holes, and clearly a lot of teams were not big believers that his early production in NPB would translate at this stage. So how did he end up with the White Sox on the contract he did? And are they big believers, or did they just think, well, if he's going to fall to us with this sort of term, then we'd be silly not to give him a shot? And what have they seen, obviously, in the brief time that he was actually in camp with them?
I think you saw both, like, especially like early live at bats, given that he's like more keyed up and ramped up because the probably the biggest games of his season are about to happen this week, compared to some other guys on the team. He looked great, and like his mishits go very far, and you're like, this is amazing. This is like the level of like physical talent they haven't had in house. Certainly in terms of power production for a while, certainly left-handed power production. And then you see him like get beat by like some AAA guys like fastball upstairs, and you're like, that has been happening a lot. We were told about that, but that's definitely there. I mean, the way that he fell to them was basically like him not having the market that was anticipated. Like when Eric and I were doing previews about guys from MPB and KBO coming over, we kind of thought like, yeah, it would be the risk I would take, but someone's going to see this, 70 or maybe even arguably 80 grade power and be like, we're going to take a chance on this. And we thought he'd be, upper 8 figures and possibly like $100 million guarantee. So for him to fall to 234 reflects just how many teams just thought this wouldn't work at all, let alone were willing to kind of go above and beyond for it, where it's almost like a little bit of a pillow contract for him, where if it really works the way that he thinks it's going to work, has a chance to test his market again while he's still 28 years old, as opposed to like he found his forever home in the majors and like this is a franchise that's going to be built around him or anything. Like really your expected trajectory of like when the White Sox get good or get better or compete for divisions and all that, he's not really on track right now to be around for much of any of it. So it's definitely a marriage of convenience. And I definitely like in talking to the White Sox, like around when the signing was happening, it was more of like, well, what else are we doing with that position, with that money? Like, are we going to fill like the seats for Ryan O'Hearn? Even if that's a more prudent addition, probably not. And, if it totally fails, it really doesn't like affect our trajectory in some big way, which is like a healthy mental approach in this than to be like, oh yeah, I don't know what everyone's talking about. This is the greatest guy ever. But also, definitely for the biggest signing of the offseason and maybe of the last 3 off seasons, for the general attitude to be like, why not? Let's see, is a little bit like underwhelming as well from some standpoints.
Well, they do have some guys who they expect to be around when they are theoretically good again. And maybe now we can talk about Colson Montgomery, who, if you're a White Sox fan, you have to be very heartened by his debut. 129 WRC plus in 71 games,
Yeah, we're talking about, James, they haven't had left-handed power like Murakami in forever. We're sleeping on Colson Montgomery here? Come on.
21 homers, played competent defense. So what did you see from Montgomery last year, and what are you hoping to see in year 2?
This may just be a roundabout way of getting to the point, but like the defense might be the most surprising part. Like he was through so much of his like prospect trajectory. It was the bat driving the bus, obviously, but also just like anywhere from like, we'll see if he's a shortstop, or he might be a below average shortstop given how big and he doesn't have the foot speed of your typical shortstop, to some scouts being like, I don't know what they're doing with this left fielder, but they're wasting my time. To him to come up and be like well above average across multiple defensive metrics was very surprising, and obviously makes it a lot easier to grapple with like, all right, well, he's now this like kind of extreme 3 true outcomes guy. Maybe needs to walk more to really fit that. But someone who's like is he going to hit enough like is he going to be a 30, 40 home run guy in a way that like makes this 30% strikeout rate survivable? That's a lot easier question to ask if he's not only sticking at shortstop but providing, surplus value there. So that makes it better. But, as bad as gone through extreme highs and lows, like he's striking out north of almost 50% of the time in the first couple of weeks, repeating AAA at the start of last year. They pull him out. They send him to the complex. He works with their director of hitting, like one-on-one and like plays in some complex leagues games, gets back to AAA and is obviously better, like definitely hits for more power. But it's a little uneven. It's not like, oh, this guy is awesome and fixed now. It seemed a little early even, or even not even like you had answered every question by the time he got called up in July, and he was kind of holding his own. He didn't hit any home runs until after the All-Star break, and they put a torpedo bat in his hand, which has since become a modified torpedo and is now just like Colson Montgomery has a bat that's weighted specifically to his specification, what he needs contact-wise, which I think the public might think in terms of like regular bat or torpedo bat, but it's just a level of bat fitting that seems to have addressed some measures of kind of swing length, so to speak. There's the way Ryan Fuller is termed in terms of like changing his center of balance or center of mass in a way that allows him to kind of like get the barrel around sooner and cover the inner half better than he was before. There's a lot of gobbledygook, but essentially you have him making a level of contact, certainly in zone, that's all of a sudden acceptable, and getting to power he's been flashing for a while, where he hits 21 home runs after the All-Star break. And it's obviously a reasonable sample, a couple months of him hitting for a ton of power in the majors, and that's great and that's very exciting. But you also don't know, like, does this mean he's like a 40 home run guy going forward, or is he going to strike out even more than we saw a little bit? So there's some unanswered questions there. Offensively, it's obviously very exciting, a little boomer bust, but it's a lot easier to kind of ride the wave. It's like, well, he's our good defensive shortstop throughout that, as opposed to like, well, what position does he go to, and what other person we have to move out of his way, and stuff like that. Given what they've acquired in the draft and are likely to acquire in the draft, Colson Montgomery at shortstop is definitely not a finished conversation in any way, but it's in a more advantageous place than it was when you just didn't think anyone could play there.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before. I just need to update my mental model because he has so many qualities that seem not like a shortstop to me. I don't know if it's just the fact that he wasn't expected to stick there or be so good there, or just he's a big guy, or just like the offensive line, just that kind of 3 true outcomes, all or nothing, like batting 239, slugging 529. It's not shortstoppy, but it worked, and very valuable if you can stick there and continue to play well. Another guy who had his rookie season, and there was some encouraging aspects to it, and also some things to work on, and especially defensively, perhaps. Edgar Caro, who the framing was ugly, at least if you look at the FanGraphs stats. Fewer than 600 innings behind the plate and negative 10 runs back there. That's not so great, but held his own offensively, and he's even younger than Colson. So tell us what they took away, positive and negative, from his rookie season.
The framing's certainly an issue. I don't know if that's any big reveal, given that he's like bottom of StatCast rankings at it. They think he can be better at it. I think you could take any generic like worst framer in the league and be like, well, there's some areas we can improve. I don't think that they feel his ceiling framing, and thus kind of defensively as a whole, is quite on the level of Kyle Teal. They always think like, as being a shorter levered guy, it's just going to be a little bit harder for him, and he's going to have to be very, very precise with his pre-pitch positioning to really try to combat some of his, frame limitations. But he clearly can make contact. He has, a good batting eye. They think that there's a little bit more power in there. He never had big time exit velos in the minors, but he still was like a 15 home run a year guy from a very early age. He was the subject of a very in-depth ESPN article about how he went to Driveline over the winter, which was, unsurprisingly very focused on bat speed and loft, which was kind of already what the White Sox said he needed to improve a little bit. So it's not the ceiling that I think it's easy for him, or the more likely scenario where he becomes the true 1A over Kyle Teal in this organization. But with Teal now pulling his hamstring in WBC, he's certainly going to get this more extended window of basically being the number one catcher on the team to start the year and kind of hawk his wares, so to speak. But it's kind of like a soft skill type of dude to the tools of your Teal. He really has like feel to hit. He really has good judgment of the zone. He really works well with pitchers. He has good pitch calling reputation around the organization. But as far as like, is he going to hit for a ton of power? Is he going to ever become like a great framer? Is he going to have like a big arm and control the running game? Probably not more than like approaching average to a little below at any point, but he's got enough kind of baseball skill that, I think eventually there are going to be other teams that be like, this guy could start for us and we'd be fine and we'd like it. And the White Sox are at least considering cashing in at some point. Probably not right now, though.
We can continue with the young guys and talk about Chase Meidroth. And I guess the big question with him, he graded out very well defensively, underwhelming at the plate. Is there any more power here? And is there any potential for him to elevate the ball a little bit more than he did? Because boy, did he hit it on the ground a bunch last season.
So, yeah, I don't think they think there's a lot of power in terms of like he's going to get bigger. I think we can stop, putting notches in the door frame for him going forward. But he is like changing his operation to try to elevate the ball a bit more. He thought his leg kick was like too big and it was like having him on his back leg for too long and he was late on everything. He was also certainly like, it's weird because there is no baseline for his major league production before last year, but he was like banged up just like all season. Like every like post-game clubhouse with Chase Meidroth has seen him like untape his shoulder or wrap his ankle or deal with like other maladies that he had. Now, is that something that a smaller player with kind of a helter-skelter style of play is just going to run into maybe fairly regularly? Sure, that might be a knock on him long-term, but they definitely felt like the general, like, all right, he's finally healthy this spring after, playing through a lot last season, is the general optimism around him on top of, like, doing some things with the swing and just thinking, like, a year in the league that, this is someone who, because of his both the nature and the shape of his AAA production, all the models love kind of him and Sam Antonacci in a similar way, to the point where the fans have kind of pitted these two undersized red-ass players against each other in a way that I think is unnecessary, but also dangerous. I can't imagine them fighting it out. It would be a horrifying level of intensity, but I think they both have a place in their long-term mix as useful guys at different parts of the diamond. But I don't think he, like, either one, certainly not Meidroth, or certainly not Antonacci because he's not played above AA yet. I don't think either one has a, like, this firm hold on, like, this is our second baseman going forward. But they both have, like, this level of, like, multi-position functionality and general approach to the game. And in terms of, like, they don't seem to value their own survival very much, where they're useful for a team to have. They're winning players, so to speak, even if they're not, core, this is our second baseman of the future type guys.
Meidroth does kind of have the look of like an 80s high school villain. He's got that face and hair, so it seems like he'd go down swinging.
That's all that made it more surprising for like Murakami to, like, in the first week, like, Meidroth's my best friend. I teach him words in Japanese all the time. We're like, really? That guy?
So tell us what the White Sox have or think they have in Miguel Vargas. He kind of became a meme the previous year because there was that picture of him looking super sad in the dugout and everyone was thinking, oh, you get traded to the White Sox, how depressing. I was thinking, hey, buck up, clear path to playing time here. And that is the way it worked out in 2025. And he held his own. League average hitter. Defense did not grade out so well at either infield position that he played regularly. So how are they thinking that the infield's going to shake out? Is he just going to be entrenched at third with Meidroth at second? And then where does Luis Angel Acuna fit in? And is Lenin Sosa the DH for this team? Like, how does the rest of the infield alignment work?
In sum, it's a pickle. I don't think they're necessarily wed to any of them at one position. Like, certainly, like, Lenin to start at the most idiosyncratic player. They don't know where to put him, like, positionally anywhere. It's possible he's demonstrated the fact that, like, there's a lot of, like, specifics to first base beyond just, like, it requires the least range that you can't assume someone has, because Lenin got caught, like, having the ball thrown on to him where his foot was on the bag, multiple iterations, to the point where, like, oh, maybe he's actually better at second base because at least he's played there. His hands are pretty good. His range, his quick decision-making is more lax. So he's supposed to bounce between first, second, and third this year because he clearly hits. He hits in this very weird style, top of the scale chase rates, but real power. Lenin had like a perfect Lenine at bat, like at the start of spring, where he like swung through 2 heaters and looked awful, and then got like a perfect splitter like below the knees and like roped it for a double. Like that's the Lenine like Sosa experience. Like nothing makes sense. Anything could happen. Look alive. It's nice to have somebody who can just hit to pull off the bench and put in any spot, but he doesn't really have a set position or like even like a great inkling at this point, like where the most of his plate appearances come from. Whereas Miguel Vargas is more geared towards, let's give this guy a chance to be our third baseman every day, at least for now. As you mentioned with, the shortstops they have in the system, or Caleb Bonnemer, who's not really a shortstop, but probably a third baseman. It's really like a kind of a prove it year for Miguel. It's not necessarily a ton is guaranteed to him past this year. He becomes ARB eligible as well. So that throws another wrench to the cactus, but he's clearly a big leaguer, but like of what stripe? Because as you said, league average, that's kind of okay at third, but his defense wasn't really good enough for third. He's better defensively at first, but it's not really nearly enough offense yet, and probably not enough power potential long-term for him to profile there in any long-term way. So his spring emphasis has been a lot on top of like the little mechanical tweak they did with him last year, which took him from being, unrosterable to that league average player who covered upper fastballs better. He's all about like, you got to add range. You got to be better on your pre-pitch movements. You have to see strides defensively to hold down this everyday third base spot. And he's kind of your best candidate to really get an opportunity here. Like Curtis Mead's still bouncing around. He's out of options. So we'll see what happens at the end of spring. But there's not necessarily like another person who's threatening for that everyday third base time at this juncture. Ironically, because he was traded for Luis Angel Acuna is probably going to get the most playing time at center field just because there's not really options there, and he can do it. He played there in the Venezuelan Winter League. They have a similar thing tweaked to his operation. It's not that dissimilar from Chase Mydroff, where they're hoping he gets the ball in the air a bit more, which they point to him hitting 4 home runs in a game in Venezuelan Winter League as evidence that he's shown some progress from that, and he's had a pretty good spring. But, it is Venezuelan Winter League. I don't know how much you can read from it. Like Lenyn Sosa is a god when he goes down there. It's something to behold. It definitely could evolve. It could be a way different like picture for the distribution of this playing time of this group by June, let alone like, by the end of the year. But that's generally where it shakes out, at least to open where the opportunities seem to lie for them.
I wanted to ask you about the Robert trade and see, of course, they're going to say this publicly, especially once they figure out what side Luis Angel Acuna bats from. I had to bring it up at least once. I had to bring it up at least one time. The dumbest thing you've ever had to report on.
That's
one of the dumbest things you've ever had to report on. But I'm curious sort of how they are assessing how they did in the return here, because, this front office group has had a couple of bites at the apple moving big veteran pieces. And I think that the industry consensus is that as time has gone on, they have gotten better with each successive trade, right? That the returns have been more impressive, and that the players that they're getting back are guys who could have a real impact on the organization. Where are they sort of grading the Luis Robert Jr. return on sort of a continuum of, I don't know, Dylan Cease to Garrett Crochet?
Obviously, there have been salary dump trades since time immemorial. I don't know if I've personally covered a salary dump trade where the front office so overtly and gleefully like celebrated dumping the salary and all that they would do with the dump salary as this one. I think it kind of plays into the Acuna thing of forgetting which way he bats, because it's like, oh yeah, that guy, the guy we got back. Right, super versatile, and then the mental shortcut of just running off like every quality of versatility all at once, and then finding yourself calling him switch hitting before you've realized it, or any of your media members who have started sleepwalking through this portion of your availabilities have noticed it either. But they like when they traded the other salary dump that they were able to be a part of, where the Red Sox gave them Jordan Hicks and David Sandlin, being the prospect they're buying by absorbing that salary. It was was talking to a person about it, and they described it as like, so we're using the rest of the Robert money, which like feels very much like they got this $20 million to play with after getting rid of it, and they were able to spend it. It was very exciting. So they signed Austin Hayes, and they feel like their outfield's a little bit more well-rounded with that. And, the Hicks is going to get a chance to kind of reestablish himself out of the bullpen, which is at least something he's done successfully before. And he's, throwing hard again, not 105, but, 98, 99 tends to play in this league, at least a little still. And they bought Sandlin, this prospect who they think has a chance to start, but hasn't got off to a good start. He's been banged up most of camp, had back and elbow issues. So we'll see how that plays out going forward. But it seemed to unlock basically the second half of their offseason where they were able to fill out all these spots on the roster. And now it looks like kind of a more complete picture that even if doesn't look like a team that's actually trying to win a division, it definitely feels like a team that's trying to put a functional roster for which their prospects can grow up in and be like, all right, we don't have to like pretend that the outfield doesn't matter, or the fact that we're punting 3 spots in the lineup. You can go out there and compete every night because we built a real team around you. And so that, I think it's been part of the positive feelings, as much as like, it was fun to watch Luis Robert every day, even when he's struggling, he can do credible physical things. It does feel like this kind of took the shackles off some of their activities of the last couple of years of team building in terms of just kind of a one-off in terms of all of a sudden having $20 million added to the budget room.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because there was that flurry of signings, and I was trying to figure out, what does this mean? Do the White Sox think they're even friskier than I think they are? Like they're trying to polish off the pieces here to like make a run.
Millions flurry in the offseason.
Yeah, it was right, and then I'm and they pick up Sean Newcomb and Sir Anthony Dominguez, and they're getting like late inning relievers. It's like, why exactly? But then I'm thinking, well, are these just candidates to be flipped at the deadline? So is that part of the calculus that they're just thinking we'll stockpile these guys and other teams will need them when the trade deadline rolls around? Is that, or was it really just like, woo, we got all this money, windfall, bonanza, let's sign some relievers?
I want to look it up. I want to say they had the lowest blown save or the highest blown save rate in the league last year. Like Pythagorean, like win-loss, they should have been a 71 win team last season instead of like their third straight 100-loss year. But their 1-1 record, 15-36, unfathomably bad at like locking down games.
Yeah.
To the point where they felt it was like kind of hampering the way their roster functioned, in the way that like the most clear example being they call up Grant Taylor, this exciting, top 100 prospect pitcher. Has been hurt a lot, so he hasn't built up very many innings, and they're kind of giving him maybe 2-3 inning outings as a starter at beginning of the year in AA, and they just call him up, and he kind of almost by default just becomes like their closer, like right up upon arrival, which even though like his advanced stuff like looked great, he kind of compiled this ugly ERA, and like they were throwing him in like very difficult moments. They tried to get a 4 or 5 out save from him in Dodger Stadium in like his first month to 6 weeks in the majors. Like it was, especially given that now this season they want him to be a guy, one of those relievers who kind of maybe has a season like Mike Vasil had last year where he gets up to 90 or 100 innings. They wanted to take it out of like, all right, you're so obviously the best option for any leverage situation. You're almost automatically going in if we have a lead to like, all right, there's going to be a real bullpen built out. Sir Anthony Dominguez is going to close. We have Jordan Hicks back out there who's done that. Like Sean Newcomb was a good leverage arm for the A's down the stretch last season. He's still kind of competing for a rotation bid, which is odd at this stage, but we'll see how that shakes out. Having like they felt a real functional bullpen and not having kind of one area of the team that just like everything sinks into the mud and resulting chaos in terms of covering innings results from it. They wanted to shore that up a little bit, or at least just like not drive their manager, they think very highly of, insane unnecessarily, if it's reasonably affordable. And, Sir Anthony's at a figure where it's not like you would see the salary of him as being like immovable. Maybe trading him at this deadline might be a little gauche after hauling him in, but the next one you could see it as something they eventually get some value back from, even if they don't like compete in any of the years he's actually here as well.
It is one of the most frustrating ways to be bad, just to feel like no lead is safe. You have few enough leads as it is to begin with, and then you can't protect any of them. They did have the worst win probability added in baseball, the most meltdowns in baseball. So, yeah, just make the team a little more watchable while you're tuning in to see some of the sexier players.
Yeah, and they kind of still think, to some degree, Sir Anthony is an upside play because they felt he was like, they could choose between, if the choice in the offseason was like between Pete Fairbanks, who's, throwing strikes, but, you're seeing a little bit of decline of the bat missing, versus a guy with like missing as much bat as ever, just to introduce this splitter that they're excited about, but this has this control numbers that they need to rein in. They feel like there's a bit more room to like, hey, maybe he performs a little bit better than last year under our tutelage, and his value, there's at least a path to his value increasing more than it is right now, as opposed to just like paying for like, please stay like within 90% of your previous self type of acquisition. That's at least how they describe Sir Anthony to me.
I guess we should talk about some of these rotation guys and probably start with Shane Smith, who, I mean, he's not the most successful Rule 5 pick in history, but they have to be feeling pretty good about how this has turned out for a Rule 5 guy. So what did you see from Smith last year? What do you think? What adjustments do you think he'll need to make in his second year to sort of sustain this? And yeah, how did they go about the process of identifying this guy as their guy?
Shane is like their pride and joy on many levels. Like one, like simple and crude one is like, we got something out of a guy the Brewers couldn't, or like we look smarter in this one specific thing than this obviously very smart organization. Clearly this is like the sign that we like have something good going on. Maybe more broadly in like pitch nerdery, he fits this role, like this archetype of players of basically like right-handed supinator guys who can spin the ball a lot, who have never had a changeup that's been viable, and teaching them kind of either with Davis Martin being one example of a kick change, or seam effects, or one seam changeups, what Shane Smith has, or kind of other varieties amongst these guys. Sandlin is learning a kick change as well. Like Tanner McDougal, one of their super spin heavy prospect righty, is like learning like some sort of seam effects thing that was described to me in confusing fashion. So he fits like this archetype of pitcher they've been chasing a little bit of, like, we're able to give changeups to guys who haven't had them. So for Shane to hit on that, at least out of the gate last year, it's never piled up quite as many whiffs relative to how cool it looks, because it's like 92 miles an hour sometimes, and it dives like super hard and to arm side, maybe a less firm changeup. But he, like, I would think the bigger thing that maybe made Shane pitch a bit better than he had in Milwaukee is that he like started throwing a lot harder. I want to say he gained 2 ticks overall, but you saw a lot of like 99 and 98 from him last spring. And, he was pretty strong down the stretch in the second half. I think his second half was probably a bit better than his first half, where you saw him start to use a sinker and really, just pound the zone to fastballs of 2 different shapes and have a lot of success with it down the stretch. He's maybe like the best chance, because of the velo, because of the fastball play, to transcend it. But it's a lot of guys where they certainly seem like they have a good chance of becoming a reliable number 4 starter, or they feel like somebody you can give starts to and feel like this is a worthwhile project. But maybe like Shane Smith being the open day starter kind of reflects the lack of front end potential that they have at this juncture, and maybe like the weak point of the team in some degree, at least in terms of like who actually becomes like an above average contributor to this group. Like, they have no shortage of guys to kind of give starts to, like someone like Jonathan Cannon, who had a pretty decent rookie year in 2024, could easily find his way on the odd man out, or Sean Newcomb could, is likely to like be pushed to the bullpen. But they don't really, the Noah Schultz's, the Hagen Smiths, or depending on your level of optimism about like Tanner McDougal, those guys are probably a bit farther away from, hey, could this guy start a playoff game for us, or start a playoff series for us more? Like, those guys kind of aren't ready yet. You have a lot of back of the rotation guys milling around and fighting for pecking order, and Shane's currently at the top of it. But a lot of it's not like you could see him. It wouldn't be crazy to see, like, if you told me Sean Burke had a better 2026 than Shane Smith, I wouldn't be like, how could that have happened? There are a lot of guys who are going to have in a similar bucket, it seems.
So they did pluck one of the pitchers who's returning stateside after a stint in Asia, Anthony Kay. He has a 5.59 career ERA in MLB, and he had a 1.74 ERA last year for Yokohama in NPB. So are you going to go closer to the 5.59 or the 1.74 in 2026? And just to head off any great excitement, remember that the league average ERA in the Central League was under 3. So the under 2 is a little less impressive than it sounds perhaps to MLB fan ears. But nonetheless, it was a strong season, and obviously he improved his stock. So what did he do differently over there, and will he actually be a different guy than he was before he went there?
It sounds like very crafty lefty sort of stuff. Like he threw a sinker more over there in a place where, it's a lot more contact oriented, and being a ground ball guy is a more common and viable project. But it's kind of none of his fastball shapes like dominate on their own. So he'll show you four seamer, he'll show you cutter, he'll throw you a sinker. He was like a big changeup guy coming out of college out of UConn, like a decade ago, and it hasn't been quite the same type of changeup performance since TJ. So now he's like a very big kitchen sink sort of operator, which is kind of like everybody. It's certainly very in line with when bringing Zach Bove, their pitching coach, over from the Royals. You had a lot of guys who had super wide arsenals there, not just Seth Lugo throwing 15 pitches, but Noah Cameron's rookie season was very much throwing multiple fastball shapes. So it's not something that gets talked about as this huge upside, he's going to lead the league in ERA here too. But it's this guy throws tons of strikes, throws a bunch of shapes. He's going to be able to mix it up. He was a 7K per 9 guy in Japan, and I don't think they're expecting something worlds different here. The only weirdness is it's almost just a reminder that it's 2026 now, is that K has been throwing 95 in spring and touched 99 this year. But I think that's more just a comment, even the crafty lefties throw 95 now, more than that's really he's going to blow people away with velocity. They still kind of perform middle of the road heaters based on shape, even though the velocity is not really bad at all, or even a tick above average for a left-hander. But he's definitely kind of, he provides diversity in being a left-hander to this group, but he's kind of very similar in terms of I can see that guy being a solid big league starter and getting you 150 innings that are quality or decent or a league average or a little better. Sure, why not? But not we think we actually signed the real ace of the Yokohama Bay Stars and it's over for everybody.
So it's not quite like when Eric Fetty came back from the KBO and was a better pitcher for the White Sox.
Well, luckily he's here too, so he can.
You have the new Fetty and the old Fetty. Yeah,
I'm sure they're hoping the old Fetty will be like the old Fetty.
Right.
The first
I know what
Fetty.
you mean.
Well, when he was bouncing around last year, when he was obviously performing really poorly, I was joking to Sox people why don't you just bring him back? It wouldn't cost anything, and you could probably got him right one time. You could do it again. And they were yeah, we talked to him and we think there's interest. And then later this spring, sure enough, they signed him. So I don't know if I get credit for putting something in the suggestion box, but it's kind of sure, why not? It was bargain. I want to say you signed for 1.5 million.
Yeah.
It's a little bit let's at least sign someone who's been in rotation before handing a spot to whether it's either Cannon or Mike Vassell stretching out as a starter, or what should be a pretty strong AAA rotation with Schultz, McDougal, and Hagen Smith down there. Why not see if he's got some of the old magic, and you have some prospects that would probably take his spot if it doesn't work out, and you can get out of it pretty quickly in that case as well.
You brought up AAA, and so I guess we should ask, you mentioned some of the pitchers here, but who are some of the other guys who are sort of floating around the high minors who you think they might bring up if somebody gets hurt or underperforms, or they're just hey, bring another young guy in, let's see how he does up here?
I think Schultz and Smith are kind of too big of a deal to be brought up just purely on injury basis necessarily, but obviously Sandlin was in camp and he'd be probably on that line if he was a bit healthier in spring. He's still throwing, but it's not quite ramped up. But Kai Bush is coming back from TJ. There's a bunch of guys who basically blew out last spring camp who would all be in that
Drew Thorpe.
Drew Thorpe, the most prominent example, though he's had a setback. So I think All-Star break now would be good for him to, but Mason Adams was another person in that bucket who's, probably a June possibility. Shane Murphy was like this kind of random like org guy who pitched really well and just threw strikes 88, 91. I don't know if he'd get a start. He was a major league invite to camp. They almost like have so many like Duncan Davitt they got from the Rays trade last year. Yes, that was the Curtis Mead deal where they gave up Adrian Hauser for a bunch of guys who were kind of like roster crunch in the Rays system. And Davitt was someone that needed to add to the 40-man. So he got added. So he's probably a good depth starter you could see at some point. Tyler Schweitzer has, bounced around, been a decent swingman for them. And he's great in AA, but gets hammered in AAA, and they don't know how much of that is like the White Sox AAA team plays in like basically Coors for AAA parks. It's not actually in Coors. It's just a really small ballpark, but it's kind of hell for any like contact oriented back end starters. So everyone who seems like, oh, this guy who gets started at like gets mauled down there, and to a degree where like you kind of see them hesitate to promote guys they really care about from AA for a while. Coincidentally, the Birmingham Barons have won back-to-back Southern League titles. Riley Gowans from that 5-person Aaron Bummer trade at the start of Getz's tenure. He's had good numbers at AA. Maybe he's another guy who could pop up. There's no shortage of like 6 starters in the high minors for them to kind of pick through at their choosing, when things inevitably hiccup at the major league level.
We mentioned Teal earlier, obviously got hurt in the WBC. What's the timeline for him, and how and where will they work him in when he's ready?
I mean, he's basically the guy they feel is their true like number one, like a catcher of the group. He was going to probably get most of the starts against right-handed pitching. He had a pretty significant platoon split in the year. And then Caro was kind of figuring out his playing time is more like, all right, when can he DH? When is he backing up Teal? When are we starting him against left-hand starters? So I think Teal is supposed to be out 4 to 6 weeks. He just spoke to media today on Friday. So as with any athlete doing an interview about an injury, he's already given the possibility of an earlier recovery time, but probably going to miss the first 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks of the season, depending on how rehab goes. But with having Caro, having Corey Lee out of options, it almost answers a roster question for them more than it makes a question for them. I think he jumps back into being a big part of the lineup once he arrives, but they don't necessarily have to rush him because, if anything, they have to figure out what they're going to do with 2 kind of major league quality catchers when Teal returns.
I just remembered that Andrew Benintendi exists, so I will just quickly... He has had 3 years with the White Sox, and all 3 of them have rounded to 0, either WAR-wise, that is, either rounded up to 0 or rounded down to 0. Do you think it's more likely that if he does not round to 0 for a 4th season in a row, that he will round to positive WAR or negative WAR? Will it be +1 or -1? Which is more likely?
Okay, because it was kind of feeling like an SAT word problem for a bit there. I like Andrew. He's been a joy to cover. I did find it funny. He was doing a podcast interview the other day, and the interview was like, so why aren't you on Team Italy right now? And he was like, I wasn't asked.
Yeah.
Oof.
I mean, they're a powerhouse, so juggernaut.
It's like, saying your name aloud makes you feel like, why aren't you in Team Italy at this moment?
Sure sound Italian.
He said, basically, I mean, there's multiple reasons. Like he was kind of still coming off or still dealing with wrist pain after the hammer issue, like the year they signed him. In the last 2 years, he's had Achilles troubles, which has corresponded with a sharp downgrade in his defensive metrics, but also just playing availability. He's just clearly been in too much pain to kind of keep playing outfield regularly down the stretch the last 2 years. Not that he ever profiled as someone that you would think this, but he did lose a bunch of weight in the name, or 12 pounds or so, which, significant percentage of Andrew Benintendi. In the idea of putting less stress on it, and said he felt great and was ready to play a lot of left field in spring training. When I asked about it in the offseason, I was talking to Chris Getz, surely you're not putting this guy down to play 140 out there in left next year. And he's like, no, I don't think Andrew wants to do that, let alone we think it's a good idea. So it's someone that almost kind of clogs up their DH mix a little bit with the 2 catchers, and that's kind of where they think they'll put him a fair amount, depending on how many of their other outfielders actually beyond Austin Hayes look worthy of playing on a regular basis. but he's hit like okay for stretches. There's certainly even been good. He, only had one 20 home run year in his career before arriving in Chicago. Now he has 3. He oddly said, like, maybe I need to hit for less power this year now that like Montgomery and Murakami are like power threats behind him. But, power has kind of been like maybe the best or most encouraging development of his offensive profile the last couple of years. Like it's a quietly good power park for lefty hitters, and he's able to pull the ball effectively. It's kind of like the coolest thing he's doing right now. Like, cause I one of the reasons I like covering him, cause how regularly he talks about like, man, guys, when I was coming up, no one like threw this hard all the time. I'm seeing like 92 mile an hour of sliders. This is stupid. What happened to the game I love? Type of situation where it's like, oh yeah, this is a guy who's going to go more power over hit in the back order of his career because he can't, like, being the sort of contact hitter he was earlier in his career doesn't seem as tenable now to either me nor talking to him by the sound of it. So I think it's still like a major league quality at bat, but with whether his defensive decline is temporary due to injury or permanent, it becomes like, one, not really a player they can move because you can't really peg him as like, hey, here's your new everyday left fielder or here's your new everyday DH, because he's kind of tweener in terms of like the offense fitting in either spot. But their offense hasn't been built up enough where you really like. He's been clearly one of probably the best 5 hitters in their lineup for like the past 2 years in a way where you want to keep running him out there because you feel like you have a real lineup when he's in there, even if he's, as you put it, not actually producing any actual surplus value of any kind. So I would love to see Andrew have like a productive season, and he's kind of like obviously the butt of a lot of jokes around here because he came on, he's got, the biggest contract ever in franchise history, and even he thinks that was a kind of a surprising revelation to him when we told him that at the press conference. And his tenure is lined up with like the base of the team going into a tank, even though I don't think like he, bears responsibility for that, so to speak. So it'd be nice to see him have a 1 WAR year because I think Andrew Benintendi's quietly still a pretty decent player. But given the injury history, given that, they're not really banking on him having a full left field workload even, it's probably more likely to be -1. He's older than he's ever been, and there's probably more options to push him out if like Everson Pereira plays like a top 100 prospect again, or Brooks Baldwin kind of builds on his second half, though he's a little banged up right now, or Brady Montgomery debuts, and we forget like Benintendi's name entirely. They're more set up than ever to kind of move on from relying on him the way that they have the last 2 years. So it's probably more likely negative than positive, but I hope it goes well.
And one thing that probably was a positive off the field for White Sox fans last year was that there was a path to succession, some post-Reinsdorf future, some way to escape the Jerry era aside from mortality. And we had sort of a mini controversy because there was a bold preseason prediction last year.
Whose prediction was it? It was mine.
It was one Meg Rowley's about how there would be multiple teams changing hands or having a new controlling ownership. And so Chris Hannell, our scorekeeper, was agonizing over whether this counted or not because it was kind of contingent and, well, it could happen here or it could happen there. So tell us exactly how you think this will play out with Justin Ishbia theoretically eventually taking control of this team. And in the short term, with Reinsdorf, he's 90 now. He just turned 90. Happy birthday, Jerry. Is he going to want to win one more while he still can before he hands over the reins here? Like, should White Sox fans be worried about some sort of, is he going to be too hasty with trading prospects or something because he wants the White Sox to get good again too soon or something?
Maybe because, like, if he wants to win one more, I don't see it becoming like, actually, money has no intrinsic value. Here's a $300 million payroll.
Can't take it with you. Yeah.
It's rarely been win one more like outside of like the normal structure operating the team. I don't see like all caution being thrown to the wind. And if you talk to like White Sox front office people, it's a lot of like, we're trying to take lessons from the Rays and take lessons from the Brewers because that's how we're going to have success now. And these people work for Jerry Reinsdorf. So I generally trust them to have an idea of what sort of constraints they're operating under. This, if anything, is the most the White Sox have sounded like realistic about their situation and winning as kind of a smaller market team, even though we're in the third largest city and media market in the country. And from while they have this weird agreement where like Jerry can sell to Ishbia as soon as like after the 2029 season, but it could also extend out to like 2034. It's kind of morbidly like seemingly this ballpark estimate of like how much longer he has to live. The inclination or the indication I've got is that he wants to basically continue running the team as long as he feels he can. But this is kind of setting up so that there is a transition plan in place for roughly when you'd expect it to be necessary too. Kind of a nice little buffer range as far as when it would be. So I don't see them, certainly not in the within Miguel Vargas's arbitration years timeline, all of a sudden like adjusting their tax in some big way. It seems like they're more hunkering down and looking to operate in with the constraints that they've been made to live within for the time being. But it's obviously across the fan base and kind of maybe their larger optimism or some degrees of fans who are, I'm not really going to give this too much of the time of day until Ishbia is in charge type of outlook of, in 5 years, in 10 years, things are going to be different. They're going to have a new owner and it's going to be towards getting a new stadium in a way that's not entirely reliant on just like hoping the public pays for one entirely or that they're going to spend in some drastically different way. That's still kind of maybe the larger fan base optimism for the team more than the specific core players. If for no other reason than this fan base was sold not too long ago and maybe even a more promising core players than what they currently have and have learned to kind of gird their expectations or gird their loins for having their expectations shattered in front of them by a young team that looks scrappy and promising now, but maybe can't close the deal as much as was anticipated.
Okay, so what constitutes success for the White Sox in 2026?
Well, the great thing about losing 100 games 3 straight years is it becomes notable if you don't do it in the 4th year.
Yeah, it's all success. It's all nothing but up from there.
Because like they're in some like reverse psychology to use their good PTHAG last year or better one against them. I think I want to say like 75 wins would be like a reasonable jump up from like the talent level or level of play they had. They've very much romanticized the fact that they were 28 and 37 after the second after the All-Star break last year. Part of that is because they were legitimately 500, then like went on like I want to say an 8 or 9 or 10 game losing streak late in September, and it really threw off the numbers that they were pinning their optimism to. But I think saying like winning, playing actual 500 ball based on the way they closed out last season would probably be a little rich, but that middle tier of like not 80 wins, but healthily in the 70s and the closer they get to 80s, the more good feelings there are. I think that should register as success. At the same time, like, and it was kind of like this darkly sad or not amusingly sad or darkly optimistic moment at Sox Fest where they were asking, like Chris Getz was being interviewed in the segment in front of the fans. It's like not really a hard interview. So it's like, Chris, how much can we how much improvement could they have last year? They improved by 19 wins. And Chris was like, how about 19 more? And it was supposed to be like him, being a little bit like overly optimistic to rev up the crowd. But that in itself was promising like a 79 win season. So that's like the reasonable, like best it could go type improvement. And theoretically, if you vaulted 38 wins in 2 years, like Will Venable should probably get some Manager of the Year votes, right? But I would like to say 75 or just even more than like 72 is probably like, yeah, they clearly got better by a significant amount. Any kind of like over 10 win improvement is hard to really scoff at.
Well, I think you have definitely been more upbeat on this segment than in some recent past.
There's no crying
segments.
This time.
Yeah. There's no sort of staring off into the middle distance, just existential struggling with what you're doing with your life. So I think this is definitely an improvement. And you can read James's coverage of the Sox at Sox Machine. You can hear him on the Sox Machine podcast. You can read him writing about White Sox prospects specifically, sometimes at Baseball America, and you can read him at FanGraphs, writing about other people's prospects too. So he's all over the place. Always happy to have you on Effectively Wild too. Thank you, James.
Thanks for having me.
All right, 2 more team previews to go, 1 more preview pod. Do I even have to tell you which 2 teams? I think you can figure it out by process of elimination or just knowing ball. We will wrap up the preview series next time, but before we do, we will enjoy a Sunday night matchup between Paul Skeens and Team USA and those Dominican Republic bats, which cannot be quelled, or at least have not been quelled. The unstoppable force, the immovable object, exciting stuff. Team USA advanced over Canada 5-3, and the DR run-ruled Korea 10-0. Good thing we had that discussion about whether it's a walk-off if you hit a home run to mercy rule another team, because that's what happened with Austin Wells. Also, Josh Naylor for Team Canada, victorious even in defeat, because he goaded his teammate Cal Raleigh into not shaking his hand or bumping his fist either. I'm gonna guess Naylor was just having some fun with Cal, but I had some fun with his having some fun. And now Julio has to do the same in the Sunday game. See if Cal will go 3 for 3 in leaving his teammates hanging. I know you won't leave us hanging when we say that you can support the podcast on Patreon by going to patreon.com/effectivelywild and signing up to pledge some monthly or yearly amount to help keep the podcast going, help us stay ad-free, and get yourself access to some perks, as have the following 5 listeners: Mark Van Dusen, Zach Breeding, Ben Bloom, Amy Ackerman, and Gwendolyn Fish. Thanks to all of you. Patreon perks include access to the Effectively Wild Discord group for patrons only, monthly bonus episodes, playoff live streams, prioritized email answers, personalized messages, shoutouts at the end of episodes, potential podcast appearances, discounts on merch, and ad-free FanGraphs memberships, and so much more. Check out all the offerings at patreon.com/effectivelywild. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can message us through the Patreon site. If not, you can contact us via email. Send your questions, comments, intro and outro themes to podcast@fangraphs.com. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Effectively Wild on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and other podcast platforms. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/effectivelywild. You can find the Effectively Wild subreddit at r/effectivelywild, and you can check the show notes in the podcast post at FanGraphs or the episode description in your podcast app for links to the stories and stats we cited today. Thanks to Shane McKeon for his editing and production assistance. We hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we will be back to talk to you next week.